And we are going live. Good afternoon, pimps and pimps.
Doing it right means using a
today?
synthetic brush when using water-based stains.
Alrighty. Wait, what? Did I go live? Okay, we went live. Okay, good. Yo, Lean, are you going good? Can you see us? Can you see us? Okay, you can see us. Absolutely good. This is important to know. And we are going live. Oh my gosh, Okay, I better get out. Good afternoon, pimps and pimps.
Doing it right means using a synthetic brush when you.
I literally have my own volume in there, so it's one of those where it's fun whenever you're trying to set everything because you're just trying to make sure that you get everything ready to go. We are live, by the way, gentlemen, so make sure that you do not say anything absolutely abhorrently stupid. I did post the link in there in the shit post, so that way you guys can hop on the actual stream and see the stuff that we're talking about live, essentially. As far as because we're also doing, in addition to the actual tiering, we're also doing the actual order. So, for instance, if it's a S tier, we want to make sure that we're doing the actual order of S tier, if that makes sense. Lean, by the way, how are you doing, buddy? It's good to see you, bro. Oh my gosh, I got like two. By the way, I'm joined today by the guys with my buddy King as well as my buddy Thunderbug. Haven't seen him in forever, but he wants to give me a hug. How are you doing, Thunder?
Pretty good.
Yeehaw. King, you excited?
Yeehaw as well.
That's what I'm feeling, man. I'm feeling it. This is going to be an awesome thing. We had a lot of fun with this last time. Essentially, we did a fire type recently, and this is kind of an idea of what we want to do is kind of continue these kind of formats and be able to get more information and intel about what is going on in this biscuit, you know? This is going to be some fun stuff. I really do believe it. Love you, Lean. Love you. But anyway, so we're going to start off essentially right here. We're going to have a picture of essentially what actually the Mon offers us. And again, this is not us basing this pick, these Mons. We're not basing our ideas essentially off of a Mon as far as, oh, well, this Mon is amazing, right? It's the best thing that there ever was, right? No, that is not what we're basing these things off of. We're basing it off of the Mon's overall viability and usage for us in battle format, right? As far as what it actually offers us to a draft league format team. When we're drafting, it's super important to make sure that we have the best team possible before we can build. And so many times we actually will screw up, do something kind of awkward, and really get a team that's inferior to what we actually could get. And that's not the best thing we want to do. We want to make sure we get the best team. So it's not only about how good the Mon is, but also what it actually provides for us in a draft format. So for instance, we could have some Mons that technically get drafted at a lot lower volume that are actually a lot better value. So what do you think, King? What do you think are some Mons that you think will be we slept on today in this stream?
Hold on, let me pull up a list of poison types.
Absolutely. And while you're doing that, I'm going to basically pull away all of the Pokemon that are for the too cute tier. You know, basically the Mons that wouldn't actually ever be drafted, but essentially we're going to pull out of this list just to make sure that we're not getting our list cluttered down with Pokemon that would never actually get drafted in draft format, as well as the banned Pokemon, things such as Mega Gengar and of course Nagandro. No, it's not Nagandro. It's Nagando. See, all right, I always say it wrong. It's one of those that you just say wrong because it's yes, we all know what that is now. Thank you.
Yes.
But so like I said, we want to make sure we get all the ones that are not going to be draft viable, not going to be draft worthy, out of the way, so we can get back into this biscuit. But what are some things that you think are kind of sleeper picks in this format? Which is basically poison types.
Dragalge.
Dragalge? Do you think Dragalge is a pretty? I mean, it is a dragon poison type, which is a very fun type to look at. It's one that I can completely understand why it wouldn't get love very often. So it does make sense why we wouldn't see it as frequently, as often, running around and just breaking necks.
I mean, its main weakness is that it's slow. Other than that, it's really solid Pokemon, really solid Spadef. It hits really hard with adaptability Dracos. You can run specs and pretty much demolish any team. You can also run leftovers and counter pretty much any Rotom in the game, basically. Besides freeze, of course.
I totally understand
that.
It
has a lot of useful resistances that can check those types of Pokemon. Electric types, if you use Dragalge plus, say, a water ground type like Gastrodon, you're basically covering every set, it being like HP Grass and HP Ice. And even if they are HP Ice, to hit Dragalge, it'll do about 20% to a defensive set, depending on the mon, of course.
So you're thinking that Dragalge will be one that we're kind of sleeping on this in this pick? Absolutely, I could see that for sure. I mean, again, it's an interesting typing. It does give it a kind of a weird, kind of awkward vibe around the fairy types that are out there. What do you think, Thunderbug? What's a Pokemon that in the poison type you think is going to be overlooked initially that we might have to argue about for a while?
I was going to kind of pick Drag, but also, of course, it's like Toxicroak and maybe like some really lower like defoggers like Guntank and Drapion. The problem with Poison is that there's such a small pool of Mons, and it's kind of divided by the Mons that everyone drafts because they're good, and the Mons that nobody drafts because they either just get outclassed or just stink.
Well, and that's what I think about Poison type. Poison type is very much in a lot of way a luxury in some senses. I mean, it's become a lot more important to make sure that you at least have good Poison move coverage. But the Poison move, let's be honest with you, Poison moves are obviously some of the most powerful and important moves in your roster. For instance, how many kills does Toxic get, or at least heavily assist in throughout the course of most seasons?
That's a status move.
Well, it is, but I mean, I still consider it as part of the Poison roster, if that makes sense.
The other main important thing for Poison types for a draft format is so you don't just immediately lose to someone carrying Toxic Spikes. Because you don't have a grounded Poison, and your defoggers, Spot Spinners aren't very good, you just immediately lose to someone with T-Spikes.
Which is one of the things that made Gengar very interesting. Let's go ahead and just start off with Gengar. And like I said, when we place him on somewhere, it's not permanently there. Gengar is a Pokemon that, forever and ever was always a really high pick. It was always a tier 1 for most tiered drafts. It was always a high point value mon. And then they removed the Levitate ability, which gave it back that one ground weakness that it had. And all of a sudden, the Pokemon that was in essence very, very hard to get rid of because it really didn't have, a really big weakness pool, all of a sudden, had one more weakness to deal with. And now, granted, it did get the Cursed Body, which made it able to touch the ground, because it didn't have Levitate anymore. So now it could actually eat those spikes up. But Gengar became essentially a lesser version of itself in some people's eyes. What do you guys think?
A big significant change in the tiers in the switch from Oras to SM is Gengar going from generally a tier 1 pick to a tier 2. And a lot of leagues have actually reversed that change because they realized that Gengar is still pretty good even without Levitate, but that was a big change early SM.
Yeah, and it still had, of course, all of its stab moves. It still had its great move pool coverage. I mean, we're talking about a mon that can run Focus Blast, can run it can run Dazzling Gleam, it can run Dark Pulse. It's a mon that can run Giga Drain. It can run Shadow Ball. It can run, of course, Sludge Wave and Sludge Bomb. Thunderbolt. Even.
I don't think you're ever going to see Dark Pulse Gengar.
If someone's drunk, obviously. I'm just going over the actual pool. I'm not saying that it's one that we would ever see, obviously.
Yeah, of course. One thing about Gengar that's really good in SM is that Z moves make it really a great breaker. Mostly Ghostium and Fightinium for the Focus Blast and Shadow Ball. So those two, depending on the team you're facing, can usually bust through the defensive counter that they decide to bring versus Gengar. And if not, you just need to Shadow Ball at once with rocks, and then the next time you come in, Shadow Ball into Z Focus will kill the Steel type or whatever.
Absolutely. And the big thing that I like about the Gengar itself is that the 110 speed tier is still a very solid speed tier to get on the board. I think it's a Pokemon that still, is very valuable. With it has decreased a little bit in what it actually costs to get in draft leagues. It still has the face melter potential. It still has a solid speed. If it was just still a Levitator, it would still be an amazing mon. But being that it's grounded now, it can of course eat the Toxic Spikes. The Z moves are still a good thing for it. It's still a very frequent top killer when it's drafted, and of course Gengar is Gengar. It's Gengar, baby. It's Gengar. What would you put this at? If I put it in the A tier, would you say that was fair for Poison type?
I'd say either A or B is fair for Gengar.
Let's go ahead and start it off with A. It could move down, only because again, no more Levitate. In this generation. It's got a great move pool coverage. It is one that still is a very frequent killer. It is a lot more of a direct offensive Pokemon than most of the poison types that you see out there. So it's one of those that I definitely think it's at least a good start for us to get the pool going, right? To get this board going.
Add my 2 cents real quick on the whole Levitate thing.
Please.
I don't think losing Levitate matters a whole lot because, again, it's Gengar. You're not switching it into things anyways, and so unless it's like a Scarfed Earthquake Mon, you weren't going to bring it in anyway. You're not going to bring it in on like an Excadrill or Landorus because you hit some random knockoff or other move and it just dies.
Well, Exca has Mold Breaker.
I was not saying not Excadrill, but other things. It's not like you're going to go, I think I could Earthquake, so you switch it in, and now you just lost Gengar because it's not taking anything.
You're correct.
Also, maybe some random
games to switch into with Levitate besides the Nidos. The Nidos are something that it does switch into with Levitate, and without Levitate, it can't switch into.
Well, and also it switched in very well to a couple of the ground watered Pokemon out there. Not like Swampert or.
Oh yeah, fair, like Gastrodon.
Yeah. Yes. And
then bring in with a Giga Drain. That could be,
yes, that's what I'm talking about. So that's one of those that it did lose that ability to be a great switch into. The ground waters that run Earthquake, and that's pretty much their only attack they run. But again, still a great Mon in all respects, at least in my opinion. Let's move on to one that I think would help us kind of establish the rhythm of where our tiers are going to be at. This is one that I think we can probably agree out of the bat is probably going to be a lower tier. If we find out that I'm wrong, then please forgive me. We're going to go into Ariados here, one that I think is helpful for us to establish what the lower values are. Is that correct? Is that fair to say? What do you guys have to say about Ariados?
Yeah, that's a pretty good way to put it.
Yes, you should never draft Ariados. It's what can we say about it? It's lackluster in everything. It's granted bug poison, not a great typing as far as overall natural BSTs. I'm not saying it's not a great typing because Mega Beedrill is a face breaker, but when you have a Pokemon type that's A, weak to rock, B, not very fast, C, doesn't get the greatest, doesn't have the best natural stats. I mean, it has potential. If they gave this thing like another evolution or even just a small bust, like a small boost in stats, this could be an interesting Pokemon to have. What do you think, Thunder?
Yeah, like I said, the only thing it has going for it is that sticky web. And there's after I think was it Ultrasound where they gave like 5 new Mon sticky webs, so it basically made it completely irrelevant for any draft ever. Exactly. You're not going to run a sticky web users anymore.
Exactly.
You got Puff, Ribombee, Galv, Araquanid. There's no more use. It's no longer I need a sticky webber and 5 other people have sticky web.
Right.
It's just there now.
And it doesn't actually have the speed to make use of it. I mean, don't get me wrong. It has Shadow Sneak for priority. And what's sad about this thing is that it does have some very interesting, it has some interesting moves. It has some really interesting moves that could be fun in the league format, but again, its stats don't allow it to be useful. And that's where it has to stay and down in the F tier. It's one of those that even that drafting it, no matter how cheap it is, it's not going to add anything to your team, in my opinion, at least. Now, if I'm wrong,
fun fact though about Ariados is that it's the only Pokemon besides Smeargle that gets both Sticky Webs and Toxic Spikes. However, it's also trash. So,
that's the thing is that it doesn't have the stats to support its cool move pool or anything of that nature. That's how I'm saying.
Basically, because you have to choose between Focus Sash and Mental Herb, whereas if you have something like Shuckle, which is usually a very similar price and generally accomplishes the same thing, that can run Sturdy and Mental Herb, so you can't really stop that thing from getting up its hazards if it really wants to. Whereas Ariados, you can pretty easily.
I completely agree with you on this. Let's move on to one that I think is another one that I think is interesting and very much usually going to be seen on a lower side of things. One that could be interesting. It's the next poison bug out there, Venomoth. This one's a bit more interesting, in my opinion, than probably Ariados is. Granted, This one does not have quite the other stuff that Ariados has, where it has, of course, at least the sticky webs. But this one does have Quiver Dance and Morning Sun. What do you guys think about this Pokemon?
Morning Sun. Doesn't it get Roost?
You're correct. It does.
You're also forgetting the most important thing about Venomoth, and that is Tinted Lens.
Tinted
and how
Lens,
really hard that hits.
For sure. Venomoth's broken.
There's a reason it always gets, I think it's banned from RU like all the time. It hits like an absolute truck once you get the Quiver Dance up. The problem is it's still kind of slow, and it's really frail. And of course the Rock Weakness does not help. So it's basically has one thing it can do, which is Quiver Dance, nuke something with the Z move if you want to give it that, and kill a couple things, and probably die to any Scarfer.
Right.
It's one of those things where I like it because it's got the absurd power potential behind it, but it also just doesn't do a whole lot. And it comes maybe to 1 game or 2 games a year, maybe sets up Toxic Spikes once, Quiver Dances maybe once, and then you kind of regret picking it over any other Pokemon.
It's funny because you're right. It does have a very interesting natural speed tier. It's an interesting Pokemon. If it had like, it's one of those that I believe is much more valuable than Ariados to your roster, and because it's a Quiver Dancer, it's one of those that your opponent's team does have to be at least mindful for in their prep. Correct?
Yeah. Because you don't prep for it, because it'll sweep through you with Tinted Lens, Bug Buzz, or Sludge Bomb.
Correct. And so it's one of those that it does have the power. I mean, and you could basically run a full HP, full speed, very minimal special attack investment with Tinted Lens and the Quiver Dance and be able to get some interesting power on there. But, as far as is it going, and it's usually a fairly cheap Mon, like a tier 4, tier 5 roughly. Is that correct? And it's one of those that I think is interesting, but I don't think it's going to be like one that is a guaranteed draft, and I don't think it's one that's a guaranteed need. Would you say D tier is fair for this thing?
No, I'd put it in C actually, because
it's. Put it in C. I think it's one of the things we could bump. We can bump it down the D if we feel like we need to, but I think for now C is a pretty okay spot for it.
Excellent. And the cool thing is, guys, by the way, as we go on, we also rank the Pokemon inside the tier itself, because it's important for us not only to actually just at least start off everything, we want to also be able to go, okay, inside of A tier, which one is better? Like if you had to pick one, which one would be better? Intrinsically. We're not talking about like for every single roster. We're talking about intrinsic value, base intrinsic value. Let's go back into another one of these that, again, we're just trying to establish kind of a trend as to what we think X and Y equals out to be. Let's move into a Pokemon that I don't know too much about, and and as far as I've never actually run it very often, that's going to be Swalot.
Don't draft it.
That's what I would figure. I mean, again, it has the interesting.
Put it in front of Ariados.
What?
Put it in front of Ariados and just end this discussion immediately.
Right. That's kind of what I'm thinking too. I just don't see much about it. If somebody in the chat has a real reason as to why we should look into this thing, please let us know. I mean, opening up its move pool and really looking through it, it does have some interesting moves available to it, but it doesn't have any of the abilities it doesn't have really very many interesting abilities. It does, of course, have Liquid Ooze, which means that we could actually switch it into, like Giga Drains or whatnot and be able to heal ourselves a bit. But at the same time, I just don't see much about this that would make it a useful roster slot for yourself. Correct?
The only thing it really has for itself is like Sub Pain Split and Yawn on a Hazard Stack team, and even then that's super gimmicky, and there's ones that do that stuff better.
I believe you're right, because again, it's got a very low BST, very low natural defense, it's for the kind of speed tier it is, it's not Wally enough to be, in my opinion. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, defenses for a low tier Mon. The problem is there's other poison types that we'll get to later that are around the low tiers that have way better defenses or niches.
That is absolutely what I believe as well. There are better options out there. Let's move on to another one out there, another one of these interesting little biscuit heads out there. Let's move on to Dustox, another bug poison Pokemon.
Dustox, aka Budget Venomoth.
Budget Venomoth. It does have compound eyes.
I got on Venomoth, and I'm not going to change my plan because I'm a crazy person.
Right. And you're right. It is a budget Venomoth because it does still have Quiver Dance. It does still have Roost. It doesn't have the Toxic Spikes that Venomoth does. But it does have, of course, really, the interesting thing about it is that it does have the Compound Eyes ability, but it doesn't really have the moves in its move pool that would make Compound Eyes very, very useful. I'm looking through it right now. I mean, unless we wanted to run like, yeah, I mean, there's every single move that's on its useful side, like the actual like useful side of its moves, don't really make use of Compound Eyes except for maybe except for Toxic. Then you're basically hitting 100% Toxic and don't have to worry about Toxic hitting. But honestly, it's just that there's not much else out there. If it had Hurricane, then yeehaw, let's try it out, right? But there's no Hurricane on it.
Everything you said is nice and dandy, but you forgot the most important part. It has a base 50 special attack.
Yeah. So again, even after a Quiver
Dancer.
Even after a Quiver Dance, it's still useless. It's like, oh yay, now you can do 20% on something, right?
Maybe, yeah.
If you're lucky, yeah.
F tier behind Ariados.
Yeah, behind Ariados, because Ariados at least has a sticky web and toxic spikes. Fun. Dustox does nothing.
We've been hanging around kind of the bottom barrel a little bit for a while. Let's get up to something that was probably a bit higher than that. This is a mon that definitely the other form of it will probably be notably higher. But at the same time, it by itself is a great Pokemon, has a very high BST for Poison type, which, by the way, if you guys don't know, Poison type is actually one of the lowest overall BSTs, base stat totals, for a fully evolved Pokemon type. It's one of the lowest out there, actually. So we're going to go into actual Muck. Regular Kanto Muck. Any thoughts here on regular Kanto Muck?
I've seen it used before. It's not as bad as you might think, but it's also still pretty bad.
Right. It's not going to be... When I say that, I'm not talking about it's a bad Pokemon. I'm saying that it's a Lowland form will be higher on the list, more than likely. I mean, if it's not higher on the list, I would be confused. Poison Touch, interesting ability. It does have, of course, the Sticky Hold. So basically, it can't lose its item if you wanted to play that game, which really could be very interesting. It does have... its abilities are interesting. They're not the best in the world. It has decent natural bulk, good HP stat, solid SPDF stat, a little weak on the physical defensive side. Interesting move pool available to it. Does not get certain moves though that it's a Alolan form becomes more usable with. So for instance, it's the Alolan form of course has the recycle set, which becomes very, very, very useful. The recycle curse set, and you just don't have that available with the Alolan, with the regular one, with the regular Muck. You don't have the regular recycle curse set available.
You also don't have Stab Knockoff, Stab Pursuit, anything that makes Lowland Muck good. You don't have the Psychic immunity.
Correct.
Yeah.
And those are all things that really very much give a Lowland Muck a lot more priority over regular Muck. For instance, a Lowland Muck again only has one weakness, which is ground. And that very much gives it a huge advantage over regular Muck. Where would you tier out regular Muck?
F or D.
I'd put it in D. Because I think it's significantly, for now I'd put it D because it's significantly better than the 3 Fs we have.
Yeah, I would much rather have Muck than any of the F tier Pokemon that we listed.
For sure, yeah.
So that by itself means it has to be a D tier Pokemon. But as far as usability, as far as just natural, just versatility and intrigue, it is going to be better than regular Venomoth. But since we already started talking about a Lowland Muck, let's go ahead and just get a Lowland Muck on the board. What do you have to say about this Pokemon, guys?
This thing's got to be like A.
It has to be A. This is a Pokemon that can easily sweep entire teams just by sitting on you if you're running a course. What I'm talking about that is I'm talking about the recycle set where you're basically just recycling berries over and over again, getting yourself just back up in there, and then just cursing up. It's just a mean, evil thing to deal with.
Basically, there's like 3 sets. There's the AV set, which is ridiculously fat. Can check pretty much any special attacker. pretty easily, honestly, especially when paired with a Wish Passer. It can basically live forever. And then the Recycle set with Curse, and then there's just the regular Recycle set, which isn't Cursed. It's like 3 other moves, which is more of a defensive utility set, but still keeping that reliable recovery.
And that's the thing, is that it's just so evil. I mean, it's one of those that it's got the stab knockoff, which makes it very difficult to deal with. It has really solid abilities. Any 3 of them are ones that could very easily be very useful for combat purposes. I prefer, of course, Gluttony and Poison Touch. Power of Alchemy is basically you have to more or less put yourself in a position to get a kill with it. And granted, it can do that with things like Shadow Sneak if you're wanting to come in and be a creep killer mid-game or whatnot. And that's the thing about...
Doesn't that only work in doubles?
It only works in doubles. Nope. Power of Alchemy only works in doubles.
Right, and we're talking about a league format, obviously, where you just can really do that. And you're right, Power of Alchemy is not that great in the actual league format, because you're not going to really just send it out there with the intention of getting a kill. You're going to send it out there with the intention of stalling out momentum or pushing momentum toward your side. Correct?
Also, Power of Alchemy doesn't work in singles. It only works in doubles.
Oh, it only works in doubles? That's right.
Yeah, you have to be your ally that dies. So, let's say you're in the field with the Muck, and your partner's with the who dies, you get grassy terrain.
I'm sorry, guys. I apologize about that. That's duh. Wow, I'm embarrassed.
Happens. It's one of those things that no one rents and everyone forgets what it does.
Yeah, you're correct. But if I put this thing in A tier next to Gengar, would that be fair?
I'd say so, yeah.
Because again, it's
Gengar, to be honest. Because it's cheaper and it offers more important roles. Pursuit trapping is always a big role.
Yes.
It can be some sort of banded monster, set up on destroy you, or just be really fat and annoying.
I think you're absolutely right in that. I mean, again, only one weakness is a huge boost to it. Has, of course, all the power that it needs to be able to do things right out the gate. It can curse. It can do the curse on you. It has the elemental punches. This thing has the ability to be very useful completely in league format for whatever type of team you're building, and that's why it's a very viable and good Pokemon to have. If its defense stat was actually higher, if they had pulled like 20 special attack from its special attack stat and put it all into defense, this thing would be just absolutely evil. I really more evil than it already is. A tier for sure for a Lowland Muck, for being again a value pick, but also just a Pokemon that can really just get work done. Let's move on to another value pick Pokemon. This is going to be one that still kept its Levitate ability in Generation 7. Weezing.
Weezing's a solid okay.
Yeah, usually very cheap to get in most drafts, correct? And it's one of those that it has certain moves available to help you deal with that. It can clear smog if you're trying to deal with a cause damage, get stab damage, and actually be able to reset stat changes on an enemy. Very helpful for that. It can Destiny Bond, so it can be a Custap killer if you want it to be a Custap killer. It can
generally the most effective set you're going to see is Will-O-Wisp, Pain Split.
Yep.
And then 2 moves being a Stab in Sludge Bomb and either Toxic Spikes or Flamethrower, depending on the matchup. You really want to nail that steel like Ferrothorn. Throw fire coverage on there.
Absolutely.
You could also throw in Thunderbolt if you want to hit like a Pelipper, for example, but that's pretty rare.
And in general, one thing I like about this Pokemon is that again, it's flexible, and the Pokemon's very flexible in what you're able to do. And you're absolutely correct. You are mentioning what you would see in general laddering or whatnot, and also just generic base league or whatnot. But it does still, of course, have the opportunity to do offbeat bare-assed ideas. It's one that again, very cheap. I would put it probably in C tier because it is a very value pick. What would you say out there, Thunder?
I'd say C. I don't think anyone mentioned, but it also it's got for a wall, 60 base speed is really good, and it has like the taunt, and that lets it to kind of be a semi-stall breaker sometimes too. I've used it before with the taunt set. It's quite fun. It's really a fun set to use. Honestly, they haven't used it before.
Absolutely, and that's one thing that's really fun about it. it is. It's one thing I do appreciate also is that it does have very similar attack and spatak. A lot of times the Pokemon, it's kind of always nerve-wracking because you're not sure. You get a Pokemon that has too much in one side of it, right? It has too much. Its attack stats just too much better than its spatak stats, so you just can't use spatak, right? Or its attack is just so much lower than its special attack that just you can't use it one way or the other. But this Pokemon can be used either way. It can be a cuss stat killer. It can be a resetter. It can be a stall breaker. It can switch in to non-mold breaker at ground attacks. I mean, it's very helpful. It's very helpful. It does work. I would put it.
I can add in one thing about wheezing.
Sure.
I got 3 kills with Specs wheezing in one game.
Specs wheezing.
Hell yeah.
What was the move that you were using, getting the kills with? Was it Sludge Wave?
I think it was Sludge Wave, Fire Blast, Thunderbolt, and one other move. Probably like a filler that I didn't click, like Dark Pulse.
I would love to see someone try to run like a belch on Wheezing. That'd be interesting to see one week. But obviously, it's one of those that'd be a meme of memes or a niche of niche types of situations. Would you put it above Venomoth?
And 3, because that was when it was actually a good physical.
I would
wall.
not put Wheezing at B. I'd put it at C.
Right, I was saying C above Venomoth.
If I had a recovery move that wasn't pain split, it'd be in B. That's the one thing it's missing. That's the only thing that holds it back.
So you're saying if it had
Moonlight, it'd be better.
Yeah.
That's the big problem.
Well, yeah.
Pain split and a kind of low HP stat and a really not good special defense stat. It's a good physical wall.
Yeah. Very solid defense stat overall. I mean, at 120 defense, if its natural HP was a bit higher, this thing would be way scarier. Because its natural HP is, of course, only 65. Could you imagine how evil this thing would be if it had 85 or 75 for its HP?
It still wouldn't be that good, I feel.
You don't think it would be that good?
No.
I think it's still too vulnerable to any special attacker. That's the thing. It needs a recovery move so that I can consistently take those physical hits.
It basically has no way to contest with Psychic types. And Psychic types are super strong in the format at the moment in this gen.
You're correct. And that's why I'm thankful that mons like Lele are in most leagues banned.
You've seen
not just Lele. Pretty much any Psychic can switch in on it. It's crust food.
You're correct. It is crust food.
A lot of things are crust food, though. One thing that you've seen a lot later in SM
is not going to scare a lot of things from stopping the switching in.
Yeah, so later in SM, you see a lot of Mega Alakazams being drafted now. People are realizing that it's really good now, and it's really good. So,
well, all of
you're
the
facing a Mega Zam.
Yeah, all of the Megas from Sun and Moon, because one of the big changes from Oras to Sun and Moon is that the Megas no longer required one turn to get their speed boost, and that was a huge change. You guys remember that, right?
Yeah, of course.
And that was one of the things that made instantly Mega Absol more viable. It instantly made Mega Zam more viable.
Mega Absol's not viable.
Well, I'm saying better than what it was because you used to have to have Protect on all these mons because, like, you used to have to sacrifice a move slot. That
was only really on Beedrill that you have to run Protect.
I did it on Mega Absol all the time, but that's just me. Maybe I'm crazy. I'm sorry, guys.
Absol kind of needed it. Nothing kind of weaker because it needed to have Protect. Metagross needed it, which is why Metagross got banned in Sun and Moon because it no longer needed to run Protect.
Yes.
And
Metagross never ran Protect in Oras. Hello. There's always 4 attacks or Stealth Rock 3.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. I mean, I've seen it in the league.
It's bulky enough.
Yeah.
It's bulky enough to get the Mega Speed off whenever it wants, anyways.
Right. And the biggest thing that that I think about when it comes to those is that, you're right about the Mega Alakazam running around. You're right about this out here. And that's why Weezing, again, you're right. Because my favorite Pokemon in my channel mascot is Absol. Not Absol. Azelf. Sorry. I had Absol on the mind, but Azelf. And so as an Azelf player, I used to love running the Expert Belt 4 moves Absol sets. and I would just love just eating up Weezings. You know, I see a Weezing, I'm like, instant kill. What's up? Because
Yeah, for sure. It's really vulnerable to the psychic types.
you're absolutely right, and that's why it's going to stay in the C tier. Great Mon, great value pick. One of the better poison types out there. One of the better pure poison types out there. Just a few things that it would need to be better overall. We're going to go into a Pokemon that I think could very easily be an S tier if we want to give it that kind of title. That's going to be the girl himself, the thickness, the real Pow Pow, the evilest thing there ever was, in my opinion. Now, granted, I'm a bastard, so my opinion is bastardish. Mega Venusaur.
I'd say Mega Venusaur is stronger in ORAS than it is in SM, but it's still pretty good.
I have noticed that I haven't been quite as dominant in the developed Ultrasound Ultramoon phases. In Sumo, it was still very powerful, but at Yusun Moon, now that a lot of Mons got their move tutor pool, it definitely hasn't been as absolutely dominant. It is a mega cost, so it is one of those you gotta be mindful of. Still, of course, amazing natural bulk. It gives you a great natural bulk for your team. It gives you a Pokemon that can deal with fairies very well. It gives you a Pokemon that can deal with electric types very well. It gives you a Pokemon that can deal with so many different threats very well. Good natural speed. Has a very versatile move pool, but it does usually just want to run, one of a few sets, even though it has such a very diverse move pool. Because of just how good, a lot of the basic sets are, that's usually what it gets locked into running. What do you think, Thunder?
Yeah, it's real fat and real annoying. Kind of gets annoyed by Z moves and the general power increase that's happened for Ultrasound and Ultramoon. One of probably the most terrifying defensive megas to deal with.
I think it is still very terrifying. It can sit on your team. It can sit just on your team. That's what really gives it so much value, in my opinion, is that it just sits there. It just literally sits on your team. It can basically, in a lot of ways, run it back until, and I will say this, the Z moves out there do give a lot more opportunity to break it, because now you have the Fly EMZs, being used. You have all these Fly EMZ is very common as a way to break it in just the ladder, but it's also very common. Say what?
Random people running Z Dream Eater, I've seen that a ton.
Oh gosh, yeah, you're right.
Psychic moves that have no viability whatsoever. They just run it just to kill Venusaur.
You're absolutely right. And they do these kind of things because, again, it's just a very, very easy, viable, helpful thing to do. And that's very much what happens. Absolutely.
You also see Z synchronize on Jolteon.
Synchronize just to do a bunch of damage to Venusaur.
Yeah, I was just saying that.
And where would you guys place Mega Venusaur at?
Honestly, even though it was better in ORAS, I would still see a good case for putting it in S. Because Mega Venusaur balance is such a hard thing to break. Like, you got Mega Venusaur, Clefable, Snorlax, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Throw in, say, a Gastrodon in there, and that core is super hard to break still.
Yes.
You do need to build a core around it, though, nowadays.
You do. In ORAS, you could just throw it out there on any team, and honestly, the team was better. Now you do have to draft more in mind with making the core be built around it. That's why it works very well with Tapu Fini. It works very well with Heatran still.
Yeah, and also Celesteela is also a great pair for it.
That's an evil combo right there. Now,
still, like they've been just walling out entire teams that are not prepared properly for it, or teams over-prepare for it and they just don't bring it, and now they have all the preparation for something that really didn't come and it doesn't do anything else against the team.
And one thing about Mega Venusaur also is that Mega Venusaur is, of course, the highest BST Pokemon in the entire Poison type roster. There is no Poison type available. Even, I believe, Nagandril is lower than that. Is that correct?
Probably because it has like paper thin defenses.
Yeah, it has to be. Let me look this up real fast. Just looking it up just to make sure. Yeah, Nagandril is a. I I can't read very fast. It's like five. It's like. Yeah, but anyway, yeah, you're right. I mean, it's one of those that it's just very good. It's not. You're right. It has dropped in its ability to be as, oh my gosh, ridiculous in Gen 7. Maybe it'll have more prime time again in Gen 8. Who knows? Probably not. Probably its viability will probably drop just because, again, we've seen certain megas get walled down, but of course we've seen other megas just stay absolutely broken, or not broken, but very, very hard to deal with. Things like, Mega Scizor, still evil to deal with. Things like Mega Beedrill, evil to deal with. Mega Zam, very evil to deal with. There are certain megas that I just don't see their usage or abilities dropping or their viability dropping. And this is one of those that I think may just get naturally bopped down over time, but is still very, very good.
Yeah, as I said, it's not as good as it once was, but it's still really good.
Right. Because again, it's just a very good Pokemon overall. Any of the flaws that Venusaur had, Mega Venusaur covers, while at the same time being so versatile for the entire roster and just something that can basically help. It can help pull a team together, essentially. But enough dick riding on Mega Venusaur. Let's go on to something else that I think is very fun. Let's go into Crobat.
Crobat's solid.
Solid speed tier at a 130. Believe it or not, I mean, people don't think of it as being able to take a shot in the face, but 85 HP stats, not bad. And
Fat Bat is real set.
Yeah, it's
one of the best taunt stall breakers in the typing, basically.
Yeah, and that's one of the things about that. It's just got so much available for it. It's got. Basically, in addition to that, of course, it has Air Slash, which allows you to basically just be evil. If you were able to play that and get, of course, those stab Air Slashes off and be able to just bust it. Very good Pokemon. Great speed tier at 130, as we already talked about. It's one of those that can run multiple items, multiple sets. It does have Infiltrator available to it, and because it is faster naturally than a Hawlucha, for instance, if you're building a team to deal with Hawlucha, you can definitely use this Pokemon very helpful to deal with, Pokemon that want to substitute, Pokemon that want to get annoying. And that's something that I very much appreciate, and also just really enjoy overall. Great Pokemon. It's able to deal with a lot of the things we talked about. And again, of course, being a flying poison type's very helpful because, again, no Earthquake. Very helpful. Very, very helpful. What do you think, Thunder?
It's pretty cool. It's got a lot of cool things. Sometimes I don't see it used the best. I don't know if I can't tell what's ever the Mon or the players that I've just seen use it because I don't know. I've just never seen it redo a whole lot. But again, it's not. I don't think it's the Mon. I think it's sometimes the player base that uses it.
Absolutely.
And it's in that weird spot where it's in the middle tiers, where it's kind of there and it kind of does things, but it also kind of just doesn't do exactly what people need it, and it doesn't come all the time. You know what I mean? That probably made no sense what I said. So ignore everything I just said.
I think I understand what you're trying to say.
Good.
You're trying to say that basically Crobat is not. It's not an every week Pokemon, correct? It's a Pokemon that's probably a 6 out of 12 matches in a 12-week season. Is that fair to say?
I'd say more than that, like 8.
8 out of 12.
In a couple games, other games that maybe does one. It might have 1 or 2 games that actually does.
Right, and usually it's a midpoint pick, midpoint or mid tier pick, correct?
Is the essence of a mid tier Mon.
Yeah, and it again, the most valuable thing for me about it is that it does give you a 130 speed tier on your roster, so it really helps your speed tiers out so much. There are very few things that are naturally faster than it. Which gives you a bit more of an opportunity, forces your opponent to have to prep more with the speed investment fully versus going like most speed investment with Adamant Natures instead of going with, partial speed, having to go all the way on the speed investment and using, even the nature to be speed boosted. Where would you put this Pokemon at, Thunder?
Thinking somewhere around maybe Maybe B. Maybe it's the first member B. Maybe C. It's kind of hard to tell because again, I'm not a big fan of the whole. There's some things that scare me. Its attack stat is okay, and Brave Bird's cool and all. But other than that, it's basically Brave Bird and U-turn and Roost. It's got some decent defensive options, so it's a fuck it. We'll just say B.
I understand what you're talking about, and the thing about me that makes me want to put it in B is, again, the Infiltrator ability. Infiltrator is very helpful, great speed tier. So, again, you're able to get around those substitutes and be able to break back substitutes, but its biggest problem is that it doesn't have OHKO power out of the gate.
Unless you're running Ban, and at this point you're not locked into a move, and then you're basically spamming U-turn all game.
Correct.
So the thing with Crobat, I feel, is that it's not the best at anything, but it can do any role you want it to, or need it to in a given matchup. It can be the defensive set effectively, and that's a very big side note, is effectively. A lot of people, when they're listing like versatility, they'll name a bunch of things that aren't really viable. Like, sure, you can run it, but it's not going to do a good job at it. But Crobat will do an okay job at pretty much any role you want it to.
Correct.
It can be a revenge killer with Banded. It can be defensive defog with like Black Sludge or Rocky Helmet. You can use it to check a Rock Polish something with a Berry. It can run Nasty Plot for a Wincon or Breaker set. It can run Z-Move also for Breaker. It can run Taunt Stall Breaker. It can basically do anything to a decent level. But again, it's not the best at any one of those things.
And if you're still nervous about it, one of the things that I love about Pokemon also is I love to look for Pokemon that also have priority access. Not necessarily that I actually want to always run priority, but just access to priority. And I mean, you also got to know Crobat, of course, has Super Fang, very helpful move for helping beat down walls. And it also has
Super Fang, the Stall Breaker set.
Yes. And it also has access to Quick Attack for, creep kills in case you are dealing with an enemy that you are afraid is scarfed and you just need like a little bit of pop damage, So I would put it as the very lowest thing in B, at least right now. Now, granted, there's no Pokemon in B right now, but would you say B is a fair tier to put it in?
I think B is definitely fair.
What do you think, Thunder?
Like I said earlier, I think B is probably a good spot. I think it's B kind of. I think it's B, and we'll figure out what else to put in B later.
Awesome. Let's move on to a very interesting mon, one that we always loved watching on the GBA channel back in the day because of its one move. It had one move that made everything so much fun, and we saw many opponents lose their freaking mind because of this one move. We're talking about Acupressure Drapion. Now, granted, Acupressure Drapion is not very common at all, but it's still one of those that just was one of those headache sets that was out there and happened a lot in the past. Still can see it in some leagues that haven't made the affirmative move to ban Acupressure, but in general, great Pokemon because, again, battle armor, definitely is awesome because it means it can't get hit by a crit. Very, very helpful Pokemon. What do you guys have to say about this thing?
Drapion's pretty good. It's in a similar situation of Crobat, where it can do a lot of things, but it's not the best at any of those, but it's viable at all of them. You can run Scarf Drapion pretty effectively as like a knockoff Pursuit user. Like versus Ariados, you can run either Scarf or Assault Vest, for example. Both of them will be effective in checking Ariados, so both of them are viable. You can run Toxic Spikes on it, you can run Taunt. Generally, you're going to see a lot of fatter sets on this, more likely, but you can also run Sword Stance. I've seen SD Z-Move be really effective versus certain drafts. It's just a nice jack of all trades, and it also gets T-Spikes.
Yeah, and the Poison Dark type's a very, very good type, because again, we're going back to it, only one weakness. Very helpful, very fun, and that's one thing I like about that. Again, only one weakness, very, very fun to use. Decent natural defensive stat, decent speed tier, 95 speed tier is nothing to sleep on. If it just, and again, so many different opportunities, so many different types of attacks. It can run, of course, any of the elemental punches except for electric, Thunder Punch. And again,
I guess the Fang moves, not the Punch moves.
Sorry, you're right. I'm sorry. Yes, you're absolutely right.
Yeah, don't worry about it.
No, you're absolutely right. Which the Fang moves are actually 10 base power lower and 5 base accuracy lower. But yes.
I once lost a game because my Tyrantrum missed 2 Ice Fangs in a row.
Oh god.
That's what we call unfortunate.
That's what we call like a bad day. You just need a beer at that point and just call it a night. Where would you guys put Drapion at?
I'd put it the same tier as Crobat at B, but I'd put it ahead of Crobat for value.
For value, because Crobat is usually going to cost more in a draft, and you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
And Crobat will have to be contested a bit more too, usually.
Say what?
Contested usually too, which is another thing. Like you can pretty much sit on Drapion to like very end of your draft. Crobat, you have to kind of pick in the middle round sometimes, depending on the format you're in and the player pool.
Yes, you're correct. Drapion will usually cost less and is less looked at, so it's one of those that when you get a chance to grab it, you definitely made the right move, and it's not as you could grab it in round 11 in mini drafts, unless it's like a 20 plus team league. Unless you're like looking in a very very big league, a number of player league, you can usually draft it very late, and it's a great value pick at that point. Because of how much it does. It basically is a lesser Lowland Muck. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, definitely. But it gets a few things the Lowland Muck doesn't.
Correct.
Specifically T-Spikes.
Yes.
And a fast time.
Or more of an immediate power threat.
Yes. Whereas a Lowland Muck is more of a sitter.
Well.
Yeah. Well, let's move on to a Pokemon that you guys were arguing. We're already getting ready to talk about.
Go for the defensive sets, because nothing sucks more than having your wall get randomly crit and die.
Oh gosh, yeah, you're right. Where all of a sudden you just go from happy to triggered in like 14.2 seconds.
All right, I got this. We can wall this or win the game. Oh, I got crit.
And then you're just wanting to kill everybody in the world. Let's move on to Dragalge. Definitely a unique type out there with the dragon. With the dragon poison type out there. And when I say unique, it is unique to, of course, the draft league format. Because Naganadrill, as we both know, is a banned Pokemon. So Dragalge, what do you get to say about Dragalge? Make your case for Dragalge.
Do you want to go first?
I don't care. Whoever goes first goes first.
Well, obviously, yeah. I guess I'll go first. So Dragalge, it has the great typing. Basically resist a bunch of stuff, particularly important things like water, electric, fire. Those are like the main resists that are most useful. It also 4 times resists grass, and that's generally pretty useful as well. But the main power of this thing is its special attack and adaptability. While it's only 97, adaptability makes it hit like a truck, especially with such a strong move as Draco Meteor. And yeah, so the main counters to dragons are usually steel types and fairy types. Now this thing can deal with the fairy types pretty effectively with a stab poison move, again getting adaptability on that, and versus the steel types it does get focus blast, which is unreliable, but it does get it.
It's at least an option. It's not always the most trustworthy option, but it is still an option available out there.
For sure.
And so while it has one of the lower BST totals for a dragon type, the adaptability ability does make up for that and basically give you a little bit extra offensive pressure. It does have a very interesting move pool available to it because for whatever reason it does get play rough. It does get a lot of these physical attack moves, but 900 times out of 900 you're gonna run special instead of physical.
I mean, you can run Gunk Shot every once in a while, like if you're scared about a Calm Mind Clefable, for example, Gunk Shot can be a pretty decent bring to ensure that you don't lose to that.
Right.
But the main thing that, brings this Pokemon down is the lack of reliable recovery. On a lot of my defensive Dragalge sets, like in Summer Showdown TTM tournament of 2018, I think it was 2017, I ran a lot of defensive Dragalge with Black Sludge and Protect, so that I could get a little bit more recovery, and obviously that's using up a moveset that probably could have used differently, but I felt it was necessary to get the additional recovery. But this thing is a great T-Spiker.
And that recovery problem gets even more worse when you're using more offensive sets because the speed tier basically means you're gonna have to take a hit before you do damage.
Yeah,
unless you force it.
it's in a
By the
similar
way,
situation as
It's a
Dragalge.
problem where it's really powerful, but it also has to take a hit before it does anything, and it gets to deal out powerful hits.
And by the way, folks in the chat, you're more than welcome to make comments or whatnot on our stupidity. Pardon us if we don't acknowledge it immediately. We are just trying to basically, remember, we will obviously address everything at the very end. We're just trying to at least get the board established right now. So please forgive us if we get quiet in direction toward you guys for a while. It's not meant to be mean. It's meant to just get things going. But Dragalge, where would you guys place Dragalge at?
I'd probably be looking at the other Pokemon on the list.
B sounds good for now.
B seems good for now. Would you put it above Crobat?
Put it in between the two.
In between, you want Crobat as the number 3 on the B squad right now.
I would say, although there's some arguments against that.
I think they're kind of interchangeable, so really it's just, for now, just put it in between, and we can discuss them more later if you feel like it's any major difference.
I believe you're right on that. I want to go into a Pokemon that really depends, in my at least opinion, on what league you're actually in. Let's go into Scolipede. What would you guys say about Scolipede right on here? Obviously, great Mon, has some fun abilities. We all love Speed Boost. We all love Poison Point. Obviously, it's more often going to run Speed Boost than Poison Point. In leagues that allow speed passing, the Swords Dance Baton Pass set is just evil, and it's one of those that forces you to have to prep for it each week.
Definitely.
Even in leagues that you don't have to prep for that, you still have to be mindful of, hey, I'm going to have a Pokemon that can come out here, hit Protect, be faster than 80% of what I have to offer, period, even if I have a really fast Pokemon Choice Scarfed. And so it's basically one of those that can force your opponent to even have to scarf things like, things like that like Coco. I'm not saying Coco specifically, but I'm saying like Mons that are in that speed tier, It can basically force your opponent to have to make some different prep just to be able to make sure they can deal with it, or at least have a better shot of dealing with it. What are your thoughts on Scolipede?
So Scolipede is the reason why I had Sawtooth on an MVP list for about 10 weeks of a season. Just from speed passing and iron defense passing into Calm Mind Stored Power, because for some reason that was allowed. So I abused that. And then Scolipede also got a really nice buff in Gen 7, being Z-moves, because SD Z-move Scolipede is about 5,000 times more deadly than SD Life Orb, for example. Because most drafts are not going to have more than one Pokemon that can really take a hit from a +2 Scolipede late game. And I say late game because obviously at 100%, all 6 of your Pokemon probably going to have a few that can take a hit, but after a few rounds of rocks, some chip damage from the rest of the team, Scolipede as a late game win con can very easily clean up a weakened team, especially with a Z move to break past the last barrier.
And again, it's one of those Pokemon that you have to, when you're going up against a team with a Scolipede, you have to be mindful about that when you're prepping. It's not one of those that you can ignore. If you ignore it, you're going to get destroyed by it. It's very much like a Venomoth. It's very much like any Quiver Dancer out there. If you ignore the opportunity for that to happen against you, you're going to get destroyed by it. Correct?
Yeah, the main issue with trying to check Scolipede is that you can't reasonably use a Choice Scarfer to check it. That's the main thing that sets it apart as a late game cleaner.
Correct. And so when I say that, it's more of a if it comes out neutral versus you is what I'm trying to say. I was trying to say about that, and that you're absolutely correct though, to where it does. And honestly, until they really release they still have not released an item that basically raises your, does to your defenses the way Assault Vest does. And if they ever do release one of those, this thing, Hawlucha, won't be quite as scary. But because this thing exists, because there isn't like a physical Assault Vest, it's still super evil to deal with.
Well, in a way there is. Intimidate, yeah.
Well, yes, but not every team has access to that essentially. But I know what you're talking about. Yeah,
a physical Assault Vest would actually be broken.
Yeah,
it would be absolutely.
Game over.
And that's why it probably hasn't been released yet. Where would you guys place Scolipede? Would you put it in the S tier alongside Mega Venusaur just because of just how it's cheaper than Mega Venusaur and it doesn't burn a Mega Slot? Or would you put it in the A tier?
I'd put it in A. It's not in the S tier.
Frail, and it doesn't have any sort of it doesn't have a major defensive role to be truly an S tier. It's really got the two things. Either it's a Toxic Spikes lead with Endeavor, or it's going to SG in your face at the end of the game and try to sweep you. That's really all it can do.
Now, here's a question for you. If it had recovery, if it had reliable recovery and a bit more bulk, would this be an S tier?
No.
Depends on my bit more bulk, because its defensive stats are kind of crap.
Yes. If it had better
We crapped on Weezing than Weezing.
Yes.
Thing is, it already has 4 moveslot syndrome, so trying to add recovery on top of that will just mean it won't be able to do all the things that it already does.
Mm-hmm. Would you put it above Gengar or below Gengar?
I think they're similar.
Similar.
I'll put it behind Gengar just because Gengar is Gengar and it's hard to hate on Gengar.
For sure, yeah.
Because I love Gengar. I love you, baby Gengar. You're so awesome. All right, let's move on to another Pokemon. Let's move on to Nihilego.
Ooh.
This is one of our friends in this video that will be featured that is going to have, of course, an X4 ground weakness. What do you have to say about that? Glass cannon on the physical side. Decent.
If only it had Earth Power.
If only it had Earth Power.
Earth Power. If only it had anything to not make it just die to every steel that isn't quad weak to HP fire.
Right. Here's my thing that I'm always curious about. And Nihilego is a Pokemon that when it released and when I looked over its move pool and when I looked over its stat pool, it reminded me a lot of Creognal. With a bit more power, obviously, because it has more special attack. Because Creognal
And a much better typing.
and a much better typing, absolutely. But again, just cannot take a single physical shot. You know?
Yeah, it doesn't have a physical defense stat.
Exactly. I mean, you know, that's what makes it so upsetting to where, you know, if it was taking, if you were hitting it with a Psychic, it could possibly live a Psychic, but it ain't living a Psy-Shock. That's for sure.
No, for sure.
So I mean,
you see some Focus Sash leads to try to get around that.
Yeah.
With Stealth Rock T-Spikes because it gets both of those.
Yes. You know, it's one of those that definitely has power, has a potential. Yeah, big yikes, Mon. I remember running an Electrium Z. Ooh, Caleb, I know you're right on that. But yeah, when it comes to Nihilego, I mean, what do you guys think about it as far as in draft league format? Again, you know, you're right. It doesn't really see all the opportunity that other things do. It has decent moves. It has decent opportunities. You know, it has Pain Split, has Acid Spray. Really, you're seeing more of it being used for Glass Cannon purposes of, you know, Glass Cannon, and then of course, obviously the Stealth Rocks, maybe some T-Spikes. What do you guys see this thing as its overall viability and usage? I think it's one of the weaker, one of the lesser useful Ultra Beasts out there, but still very useful. If
I'd
played
say it's
right.
about average from the Ultra Beasts, and one use of it is checking special attackers because it's frail on the physical side, but on the special side, it is definitely not. It is very fat.
Yeah, and if you're prepping against a Nihilego, it does force you into more of a thought process of, do I run Psychic or Psy-Shock? And that can actually mean the difference in some situations between, you know, a win or a loss for your team. And I mean that for you as the person who has to. I'm talking about that for your opponent. Your opponent could possibly win because you're prepping for Psy-Shock, and so he doesn't bring Nihilego, and all of a sudden you have a lesser powerful move that maybe his team naturally does better against it as a whole, you know?
Yeah, it's possible.
I mean, and again, it's also, if you haven't, I mean, it's still very high cost in many leagues because of just what it can possibly do. So it's one of those that I don't believe it's anywhere near as good as certain Ultra Beasts. I'm thinking like C or D tier. What do you guys think?
I think that's a bit low for Nihilego. Honestly, I'd put it in B, mainly because of Beast Boost. If it had any other ability besides maybe Levitate, but like any other like non-useful ability, it would be pretty trash, I feel. So having Beast Boost and the ability to choose whether you want Speed Boost or Special Attack Boost, you can do that on this Pokemon, makes it a little bit of a more versatile cleaner than just a random choice Scarfer or...
I guess you're right also, because
like
in addition to that, it's also a poison type, and poison typing Pokemon generally don't have the highest stat totals.
Something unique to this list.
Say what?
Something unique to this list being a poison type.
Correct. And also, again, a very, very high base stat total for a poison type. Most poison types are very, very low, and this one's natural BST is very high in comparison to a lot of other ones. So I think you're right about poison, about it being a B type, because it also is a stealth rocker, which is utility, Let's move on.
It can do a lot of things.
Absolutely.
It's very good at the things that it does do.
Let's move on to kind of an interesting one that I'm kind of curious to see if anyone has anything interesting to say about it. Let's move on to Survivor.
Scarf Final Gambit's the only set.
Scarf Final Gambit. Oh gosh.
I'm serious when I say that.
No, I believe it. You're absolutely right. I mean, that is an evil move right there. For those of you guys who know what Final Gambit does, it does damage equal to the user's HP. The user does faint, but it does damage equal to the user's HP. It's where it's basically a suicide attack. It does have, of course, the opportunity to use the move Coil, but its natural stats really aren't that great, at least in my opinion. Does have Infiltrator ability, which is kind of interesting, but it doesn't do really too much very well. What do you have to say about that, Thunderbug?
So we got Scarf, Infiltrator, Final Gambit. No more Suicunes.
No more Suicunes. Goodbye, Suicune. You be bye.
Okay, until Suicune lives in like 30% HP still, but that's not worth it.
We can gloss over that, yeah.
Where would you guys put this thing at? Automatic F tier?
Yeah, F for sure.
Yeah. Put Arbok down there too, please. Just get that out of the way now. Let's get that out of the way now.
Absolutely. What would you guys say about? Let's move on onto Arbok.
Arbok's also pretty trash.
It is somehow a worse version of Survivor.
Really?
No, that's not true.
Even with Intimidate, I feel like Intimidate and it also has a.
I'm not gonna lie, I forgot I got Intimidate.
It also has, of course, Coil still. It also has, of course, Glare, which you guys remember. Glare is a very, very awesome. It's basically Thunder Wave, but 100% accurate. Because they did bump the accuracy on Glare to 100% this generation.
Glare would be the best move in the game if this were Gen 6.
Yes. And it's still a very good move. Correct?
For sure, yeah. I think on this, mostly you're just going to see Glare, Coil, Gunk Shot, and Earthquake usually. And that's the only set that's really worth running in my opinion. And it's not even that good on that set.
Yeah,
but like you can Glare something, so may as well put it on D tier instead of F, because it might do something in a game.
And it also, in my opinion, is more valuable than Survivor. It does have, of course, Priority X with Sucker Punch. It does have Haze. It does have the Fangs. This Mon can do some work. It's not going to do work, but it could do work. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it might get a kill in one game.
And more importantly, Intimidate's very helpful for helping you balance out or deal with teams at times.
Yeah, being able to shuffle Intimidates is always nice. Let's
move into another one of these poison and grass types. We're looking at a Pokemon with the ability Effect Spore and Regenerator, Amoonguss.
I think Amoonguss is pretty good.
Definitely.
The Regenerator is one of the best abilities in the game, bar none.
Absolutely. Regenerator, if you guys don't know, is basically going to give you a third of your maximum HP each time you switch out, so that way you're basically able to help keep your team at an overall higher stat total.
So Spore is something that a lot of people need to respect if they don't have a grass type that can wall Amoonguss. Like if they don't have a Venusaur or Roserade, basically,
yes,
they need to either pick something that they're like, okay, if they bring a Mungus, I'm going to sleep this Pokemon and have a dedicated sleep fodder with Sleep Talk, or they need safety goggles on something. I've seen a lot of safety goggles Tornadus versus a Mungus. And Tornadus is something where the item isn't that useful, but if you're facing a safety goggles Tornadus versus, say, a Life Orb Tornadus, you're going to notice the difference.
I believe you're right on that. Great natural HP on this thing at 114. I mean, this is one of the higher HP stat totals for a poison type. Very solid, not the greatest defenses, but they're definitely average. Very slow speed tier, which is actually very helpful for building a full team, because that way it does make it to where your opponent doesn't go, oh, I could run Trick Room and just basically destroy your entire team. Oh. No, it gives you that opportunity to basically keep that mindset going and give you more of an option in team building. And that's one thing I like about this Pokemon. This is a very helpful Pokemon for sure, for what it gives you as far as opportunity. And also, it can get kills. People don't forget it can get kills. It has Clear Smog, which is a stab move and very helpful. Obviously, you don't run it very often, but it's helpful if you feel like your opponent's going to be setting up on you.
I run Clear Smog all the time on a Mungus.
Yes, because it helps you deal with Clefable. It's very helpful for dealing with Clefable.
For sure. And by the way, it does have a higher attack stat than Talonflame. Haha.
That's correct, because Talonflame is surprisingly not that powerful out the gate. Now, where would you put Amoonguss at? Usually it's a lower tier, it's a middle tier Pokemon. Regenerator ability, very solid natural HP. I believe its maximum HP investment, which you usually run max HP, is 432, which is a very solid HP stat. Where would you put it at?
You can actually get a little bit more efficient with your EVs by not going max HP if you're going for a mixed defensive spread.
Okay, good point. But
just throwing that out there.
Right. Now, so what would you
put it fairly high up?
Would you be willing to put it? I mean, I think it's automatic A tier. Would you put it in? Would you be willing to crack it into the Mega Venusaur territory, or no? I don't think so.
I would put it in A at the highest.
Highest in A? I believe that's very fair to say, because again, great ability, great abilities. Both abilities are great, and
it forces respect in prep.
Yes, it does. And it also, again, gives you another option to help deal with setup Pokemon that are going to try to basically get the clear advantage of you. Caleb Patton, by the way, is making a very interesting remark in the chat. Can you guys see the chat right there? He's saying, I can see him being an S tier, to be honest. It's hard to deal with this thing in some cases. It tanks so much, and Regenerator gives it so much. Black Sludge Recovery, for this person in particular, helps a lot with Trick. You are absolutely correct there. It is a Pokemon that, again, being Poison type, anything we have in Poison type can, do the Black Sludge ability. Sorry, not the ability, but item, which basically helps negate tricking on the opponent. It does become a bit more interesting as far as overall prep strategy and whatnot. It's hard for me to put it on the same tier level as Mega Venusaur, just because I believe Mega Venusaur is still better as a grass poison. But what do you think about this, Thunder?
Yeah, the difference I think between Venusaur and Amoonguss is simply that Venusaur will also threaten you way more offensively, where Amoonguss just threatens the wall, your entire team, and put it to sleep so something else comes in, clicks ST, and sweeps you.
Right, and because it's putting things to sleep,
destroy.
Yeah, and because it's putting things to sleep,
on your team by itself more.
Yeah, and because it's putting things to sleep, it's not going to be toxicking as often. So I mean, it's just that's kind of where it comes, in my opinion. Was that fair to say?
Yeah, definitely.
So that's why I would put it in A tier. A great Pokemon, but definitely A tier versus S tier. Let's move into... We've covered a lot of these really interesting Pokemon that have a lot of different offensive ability. Let's keep going with some defensive, or some Pokemon that just put general momentum or pressure on your roster. Let's look at Tentacruel.
I feel like Tentacruel is very average in what it does. Yeah, that's basically all my thoughts on Tentacruel.
I understand this. It's a spinner. It was a lot better in what it used to do.
It checks a lot of boxes.
Right. It checks boxes. It has great SPDEF. It has 100 speed, which is people we forget about. But when Toxapex came out, Toxapex does
immediately outclassed.
Yeah, Toxapex. The only reason why you would take this over Toxapex is because you just didn't have enough points for Toxapex, or you just desperately needed a spinner. Is that fair to say?
No one needs a spinner that bad.
Exactly. Exactly.
Not anymore. Yeah. There was once a game where I got 5 kills with Scarf Tentacruel, which was mostly as a result of my opponent just not having answers to poison moves. But that could have been just any other poison type as well.
Absolutely. Decent spinner, but at the same time, it's one of those that most of your opponents are going to be able to play around it, and again, it's just one that does not enjoy taking earthquakes to the face. I put it in C. I put it in C tier, maybe D tier. What do you guys think?
I would say C. I love 10. It's kind of my default to I need a spinner or I need something removal or I just need to put some random mid-tier mon on my team. I'll slap it on teams. I'll stick it on Bulu teams just because why not? And it does okay. Like I think someone else said, it does what it does pretty well. The problem is what it does is not that valuable anymore.
Right. So you would put it in C tier, correct?
In C.
You said C or D?
D.
D?
I'd put it in
C.
Oh, C. I'm sorry.
Cruddy.
Pardon. It's one of the things about Discord is that Discord, if you just like make an initial noise, it won't always pick it up completely. So, pardon about that. But Tentacruel definitely in C tier. Would you put it above Venomoth or below Venomoth?
I put it above Weezing.
Above Weezing. So you're saying highest in C tier right now?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Because
it's not a bad mon.
It isn't a bad mon, and because it is a water type, it does give you different options available. But in the realm of being a water type, I'd much rather have there's better water type options out there. But obviously we're judging it as a poison type essentially. I guess that makes sense at all.
It's a good random mixture of being a water type that can absorb T-spikes or set up T-spikes, and if you really need to, spin away some hazards. That's kind of what it does. And Liquid is cute, but that's basically it.
Let's do this then. Let's go into a different Pokemon that I think would be very interesting. Another water poison type. We're looking at Qwilfish. Yeah, I stuttered on that one right there. It's Qwilfish.
Qwilfish is a valued low tier pick.
Mm-hmm.
It's got a lot of things going for it, mostly hazards being spikes and T-spikes, as well as a fast taunt, as well as if you run a rain team, it can run a sweeper set. You used to see that in OU back in the day, replacing Kingdra on some rain teams because in that particular meta it was better.
Right.
With Z Explosion for Toxapex, I believe. Early SM was the set. But in draft format, usually you're going to see the bulky Intimidate set with spikes.
And the best part about spikes is that it does give you a lot of different opportunities at that point. It has very good coverage. The problem is that it doesn't have the ability to utilize its special coverage quite the way that we'd like it to because of obviously it being so low in the special attacks department. So it does very much limit it to being basically a utility play, a utility picker, mover. Again, spikes, toxic spikes. It does have, of course, liquidation, a very, very good move. It does have a decent attack stat at 95, but again, you're basically using it for bulky. It does have priority access with Aqua Jet, so very interesting mon overall. Has Intimidate, which is very fun to pair up with other Pokemon because, yes, Intimidate's a very fun thing to get. And usually this is going to cost one of the very least things that you could actually buy in a draft. Is that correct? One of the very least things you could buy in a draft usually.
In tiered systems, I usually see it tier 4.
Yeah.
Tends to be T4.
Yeah, T4 because it has a good ability. It can also be used in the rain teams, obviously, but rain teams in draft are not seen quite as often. You still see them, mind you, but they're not the go-to build, or you're not going to see them in every single draft league.
Yeah, if you're drafting a rain team, usually you're going to want a different rain sweeper than Qwilfish.
Yeah, you're wanting to get Mega Swampert. You're wanting to get
I think Kabutops is a great pick for that.
Or Kingdra.
Those other rain sweepers. Like he said earlier, Qwilfish just had that niche in OU where it was at one point, and that it could kill Toxapex with a Z move.
Yeah. What would you guys put this Pokemon at in a draft league format? As a tier 4 or as a very, very low point value Pokemon that has Intimidate, obviously, and can be bulky, has priority access? Where would you put this bad boy at?
It's tough because it's a low point mon, so obviously you can't expect that much of it, but for what it's worth, it is a pretty solid Pokemon.
Mm-hmm.
I'd put it in high C to low B.
And again, a lot of it's because I would be willing to go ahead and put it in B tier also, because of the fact that Intimidate's a very, very, very useful ability. It has priority access. It has Pain Split. It has the spikes. It has 2 forms of hazards on this Pokemon. It has, it has a lot of different moves available to it. It's just very good at being a Pokemon that nobody would prep for intentionally, at least in lower skilled battlers, but can be very, very useful in everything that it does. Again, 95 in the base stat total for attack, very, very solid, especially as a poison type. I would never draft this thing with the intention of being my sole water type if I'm going to draft this thing, but at the same time, very, very useful as a utility player, and also as a very, very just interesting and cheap Pokemon to get to fill out your roster. Fair to say?
Yeah, I've seen this as a tertiary water type on a draft before. Like, they had their main bulky water. I think, I actually don't remember what the specific mons are, but they had a bulky water, an offensive water, and a Quillfish.
Right. So they had basically a background option that was this was the secondary water type, the one that wasn't really the attention getter. It was more just the Pokemon to have on there. Is it going to be a Pokemon you bring every single week? No, we're looking at like a 4 to 5 game, 5 out of 10, 4 out of 10, week mon, but it's a mon that can be very useful in the weeks that it's brought at. And again, its abilities help you nerf, or at least check, or at least help deal with some very, very tough things to build against. And that's why this Pokemon, in my opinion, is going to be a low B tier. Absolutely. What do you think, Thunder? You agree?
It's okay there. I'll accept it being there. I actually think it's maybe just a bit too much of just a random roster add-on that's decent, but doesn't offer you enough utility kind of, especially when you consider the other Bs what you add in there. It's you got things like Drapion and Dragalge and Crobat and Heligo, and then there's just Quillfish. I don't know. Just maybe just me being weird. I'll come around to it later. Maybe I'll get.
That's actually very fair. What do you say to that? If we put them back in C tier at the very top of C tier, do you think that's fair to do?
I think maybe just leave them there for now, and then B, and we'll come back to it later if we want to change it or not.
Sounds good.
We'll see.
Let's go on to Golbat, one of the few Eviolite users that you might actually see get drafted very frequently. Very interesting Pokemon. Still has, of course, the same 2 abilities that Crobat uses. Doesn't actually lose a lot of power that you would think that it would lose going from Crobat to Golbat. Because Crobat, is not actually that much bulk, that much stronger. Crobat gets 10 more physical attack and 5 more special attack than Golbat. But the big thing between Crobat and Golbat is that Golbat is a lot slower than Crobat is. What do you think about Golbat in the draft format?
I think Golbat is more so the wall of the 2.
Yes.
And Crobat's more so the utility, offensive mon, everything else basically.
Yes. Whereas Crobat can actually be a sweeper if need be, Golbat is more of a low tier, low price wall poison type. It is, of course, going to be running Eviolite most all the time. Yeah.
All of the time.
All the time.
Yeah. I mean, I hate to say all the time because all the time just sounds so generic or sounds so robust or just definitive, but you're correct. It's basically always going to have the Eviolite on. Where would you put this at as far as...
You're going to run 2 things. You're going to run Eviolite, or you're going to run some sort of weird gimmick scarf set to try to outspeed and kill some random threat.
Yes. Where would you put this at in the tier board? Would you put it in D tier alongside in front of Muck and Arbok, or would you put it in in possibly even C tier. Where would you put this one at?
I think maybe C. I think sometimes its bulk, especially if the Violite, gets really deceptive how fat it actually is. But at the same time, it also has really that one set, and if it gets knocked off or whatnot, it kind of just loses its ability to function.
I think you're absolutely right in that.
It's easy to prep for, in that you know exactly what it's going to do before you get to the game, but it's still super fat.
It kind of can do what you want to do. It can do it pretty well. Like you need I need an answer to something. Clicking close combat. There you go.
Yeah, the main problem with Golbat, in my opinion, is that while it does wall pretty much everything, it's in a similar situation to Milotic, in my opinion. It walls everything, but it doesn't really do much back. You know?
Yeah. It relies on being able to status. It relies on being able to status to actually be effective against an opposing team. Or
the amount of times I have seen a PP stalled Golbat is high.
Fang, Toxic, and then like Brave Bird or Taunt or something.
Yeah, and it can. Don't get me wrong. It can do work, and that's why we're putting it in C tier. It does. I think it does naturally more work than definitely an Arbok or Kanto Muck, as far as just what it adds to a roster. But it's not anywhere near as useful as the spin option in Tentacruel or just basically the physical wall option of Weezing. Fair to say?
Yeah, for sure.
Let's move on to.
Go ahead.
Let's move on to.
Actually, now that you said that, I think Golbat's a better physical wall than Weezing.
You're right, because of the Violet.
Yeah, and mostly reliable recovery.
Because it does have Roost. You're right.
I think they're kind of close. Yeah.
Well,
Golbat is faster, got faster taunt, got recovery, can U-turn out.
A much less viable spec set, though.
Much less. Wait, does Golbat get Nasty Plot?
Golbat does get Nasty Plot, yes.
Perfect. Screw your spec set. We get Nasty Plot.
I would still put Weezing better than Golbat, though. Fair to say?
I mean, they're pretty similar.
Yeah.
In value, in my opinion.
We'll put them next to each other and move on from there. If we need to go back and argue about it later, we can do that.
I don't think it's that big of a deal.
Neither do I. Let's move
on. I'm not
to
the higher one.
Let's finish off. We're not going to do Ivysaur or Gloom, but let's move on to.
Man.
Do you want to do Gloom?
No.
Okay. Let's move on and finish off a couple of these all the grass poisons, because when we're looking at them one by one, it'd be very easy to notice them. Let's start off with Victreebel.
It's one of the most niche poison types that we have. It's very good as a Sun Sweeper, and it's very bad outside of being a Sun Sweeper.
And there really hasn't been very many Sun teams be effectively used in draft format in quite a long time, correct?
Actually, Real Slim Random, who used to be a player in LD, he's kind of like left the scene now, but he drafted Triple Weather in a lot of TTM tours and some other tours as well. Weather. Yeah, he had Sun with Victreebel Torkoal, as well as Rain and Sand. And he was actually really successful with Victreebel in particular, and he actually popularized it a bit in the community, just like right there. It's not like a super popular pick throughout the whole format, but it can do a lot of work in ideal situations, basically Sun being up.
Gotcha. But as far as overall versatility and adding to the team,
it doesn't have versatility. That's not its
versatility and adds nothing to the team other than being a Sun Sweeper.
Exactly.
It literally has one job and one job only.
Where would you guys have? I mean, it does get knockoff. It does have a 105 attack, but at the end of the day, this thing I believe can't be higher than bottom of D tier. Is that fair to say?
I think it's definitely better than Muck and
definitely better than the D tiers we have, because if you don't properly prepare for it, the Sunset will just run through you with a growth.
Okay.
Yeah, Solar Beam hits really strong with
knockoff, Poison Jab, all that jazz.
It does also have recovery options
because of Chlorophyll. You can often run Modest because you don't need Timid to outspeed things when you're double speed. So Modest, Life Orb, Solar Beam,
or High D. It's one of those two.
Well, let's drop it. Let's drop it at the very top of D tier for right now, just because I believe that there are as much better in the grass poison variety. Is that fair to say?
I mean, there's better mons, yeah. But in the specific thing that Victreebel is good at, there's nothing that outclasses it.
Then let's put it in C tier then. Let's move on to Vileplume.
Okay, Vileplume with the addition of Strength Sap is actually a pretty decent physical wall. It's just a decent low tier mon. When you have a few points left over and you notice a water type weakness, for example, you can just throw on a Vileplume and generally be fine.
Right. It does also have Effect Spore, which is a very fun ability to switch around people on and hopefully get the roll on. You know.
Yeah.
Very fun.
It's also one of the better fighting type checks in the game.
Yeah.
And again, it's not.
It's also really someone who doesn't really know what they're doing, and they just get completely walled by Vileplume just spamming Strength Sap all game.
Yeah. It's a very and we will get to Roselia. Apparently people are looking at us to do Roselia also in addition to Roserade, so that'd be fun to do. But anyway, back to this. We do, with this Pokemon, again, Strength Sap, great additional move. Very fun to have. Decent Spatak at 110. It's one of those that, where Victreebel can be either physical or special. Vileplume is forced to be a bit more focused on special. It does have aromatherapy. Very fun thing to have available to you. It can leech seed. It has moonlight if you ever wanted to play that game. It has a lot of moves. It has synthesis. It has a lot of these moves that are available to it that offer it very, very different dimensions. But you're correct. I mean, the Strength Sap's a very great move. Where would you guys place this thing at? It does have Pow Pow with a 1/10 attack.
I think this mon is okay value for what it costs, so it's like the definition of average in my opinion, so C tier.
C tier?
Yeah. C tier.
I'll put it right next to Victreebel.
It pretty much gets C tier solely because of Strength Sap. Otherwise, it's because nobody looked at it or cared about it until all of a sudden it got that stupid move.
And then all of a sudden it became something that was actually somewhat viable in certain niche situations.
It became a meme that's somewhat viable and is just sometimes really cancerous if you don't have a good answer to it.
Or a good battling foundation to deal with it, correct?
Yeah.
Well, let's move on to Venusaur regular Venusaur.
And players that don't know what they're doing, or they're not very good or new to the format, and they just get destroyed by it.
Right. Let's move on to regular Venusaur. The regular Venusaur, of course, still does have all the weaknesses available to it that Mega Venusaur does, but doesn't have Thick Fet to actually take away two of them. It does have a much lower overall stats. Still the same speed tier, still the same HP and whatnot, because HP obviously doesn't get boosted by being a Mega, for those of you guys who forget that. Decent move pool, very decent move pool, same exact move pool as Mega Venusaur, but just does it at a lesser volume and a less reliable volume. Where do you put regular Venusaur at?
I think this is an easy S+, because it was obviously banned in Black and White for being too good, so obviously it's better than things like Excadrill, which got banned after Venusaur did. Well, not banned, but Sandrush was banned. So obviously this is a better pick than pretty much anything that's legal in Black White right now.
Absolutely. Specs Latios, garbage.
Yeah, Specs Latios, garbage. Absolutely. Let's just go ahead and just give this an S+ tier.
God tier Venusaur.
Now, obviously I'm memeing a bit there, but it's not a bad Pokemon. It has very similar capabilities under Sun to Victreebel, but it can also run defensive sets semi-viably. You're never going to wall a whole team with a Venusaur, but it can be a decent part of your defensive core in certain games.
Right. And the biggest thing about Venusaur, though, versus like Mega Venusaur, is that Mega Venusaur can switch into a lot more things than regular Venusaur can.
Well, yeah,
level right in front of Victreebel.
Yeah, right in front of Victreebel. I think you're right as well, because again, it just can't switch. The things that Venusaur does, Mega Venusaur does very well, which is being able to switch into things, the Venusaur itself can't do as well. And that's kind of the big difference between Venusaur and Mega Venusaur, and why it's separated by so much, in my opinion. Let's move.
Yeah, obviously.
Let's move on to the final grass poison Pokemon on our roster that we're going to be looking into. It's not going to be Roselia. For those of you guys out there looking into Roselia, it is going to be the lady girl itself, Roserade.
This is my mascot, by the way.
I love
cool.
Roserade. It's just so Roseradal.
That's a word.
Yes, it is. Damn it. Has aromatherapy, not very often used. Has of course the sludge bomb. Has of course spikes. Can do a lot of very different things. Synthesis, toxic spikes. It has a pretty good special defensive stat. Great Spatak. 125 Spatak. Great on that. Can be very frequently seen as a choice scarfer or even a specker. What would you like to say about your mascot here?
A lot of teams lack a switch into offensive Roserade, just in general.
Mm-hmm.
They can't deal with it.
Right.
And so that being said, that opens up Roserade to be very threatening to a lot of drafts, offensively as well as versus some drafts you can run a defensive Roserade with spikes, and that can really pressure wall cores by switching in repeatedly on spikes. So Roserade is kind of like really good at a lot of things. So I would rate it pretty highly.
Definitely as well. I mean, this thing can be an absolute face melter. It gives great coverage. Even psychic types don't want to switch into it because obviously you've prepped for a psychic type at that point, and so you're probably going to have Shadow Ball on it at that point. So it's one of those.
Yeah, you a random technician, HP, hidden power, whatever you want.
Yeah.
And also you got 90 base power move, coverage for anything.
Exactly. And that's what really becomes a very, very deadly game right there. That's what
it makes offensive, like the King said, offensive Roserade is pretty much impossible to really switch into until you know the set, because you don't know what coverage move it chose for hidden power.
Right.
My Mega Camera can switch into this. No. Now you get HP watered in the face. Congratulations.
That literally happened to me.
Oh, no.
Yeah, exactly. I remember seeing that game.
I led off with it, and I got HP watered. And I had a Ferrothorn, too. So, like,
I remember that game.
Forgo, he was like, I don't need HP
Not
fire.
why you see not the HP fire for the Ferrothorn.
HP water.
Yikes.
Good God. That sucks so bad, dude.
It was a big yikes.
That's one of those moments where you just want to go sit down and cry somewhere in the corner. Roserade for low A tier or B tier, guys?
A tier.
I'd put it A.
Definitely an A tier. Would you put it behind Scolipede or in front of Scolipede?
I'd put it as the highest in the A tier, actually.
Even above Amoonguss?
I would,
Yeah. I'd say it's definitely better than Amoonguss.
The offensive utility that it provides, and like it's a good scarfer as well. It can basically do any role you want, similar to Crobat, but it's better at those roles.
I got you.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it hits the field and you don't know what it does yet. It's really scary because you don't know how to handle it yet. And if you pick wrong, you could just open a big hole in your team for the opponent to take advantage of.
Absolutely.
It's one of those Pokemon where you see the matchup and you're like, oh no, he has Roserade.
We're going to go ahead now and basically move on to finishing off a lot of the lower Pokemon that are in our roster that we actually are looking into. We do have still some Pokemon in the pool that are possibly D's or F's. Let's look into the first one being a one that is basically Gengar but still has Levitate, which is Haunter.
I don't think it's that good.
Neither do I. We're talking about Pokemon that are back in the lower part of the draft. Obviously, the low tiers as far as D and F tier. It can run Eviolite, and it still has a 115 Spatak, but is of course under 100 in speed. It does have Levitate ability, but what do you guys think about Haunter?
Haunter is for people who have not accepted that Gen 7 happened yet.
Exactly.
That's
Basically. People that are still just out there just angry about Gengar losing its ability.
They're sleeping. They're holding their Gengar plushie tight in the chest and saying it's gonna be okay. The bad man won't hurt you anymore. That's basically what it's for.
Absolutely.
Oh,
Absolutely.
I like that.
And that's kind of how I see it for sure. Automatic F tier?
D tier.
D tier.
It's not useless.
The gimmick of being an okay random scarfer or some random specs against slower teams. Because 150 special attack is a little bit
I think it's probably
No.
fair for sure because, again, would you rather have Haunter or would you rather have Ariados, Dustox, Viper, or Swalot? I'd rather have Haunter.
Gimmicks like Destiny Bond and other weird gimmicks they can do. Like, it can do annoying. I think you got like sub pain split can be annoying.
Yeah.
It's got some annoying gimmicks it can do, but it's not like a real. It's not a real mon.
Right. It has opportunities, but it's not going to be the absolute important mon for your roster. And none
It's
of
not
the,
a mon called draftable,
yes,
but if you were insane enough to draft it, it might do something.
it's a mon that you might get drafted more often if you were in a absolutely ginormous, league, like a 28 plus league,
Perhaps, yeah.
Yeah. Guys McGee probably Guns McGee over here in the chat says, that bulk is too horrid, and Gengar still does what Haunter does, but just better, just no levitate. And you're absolutely right.
Gengar also costs way more, so
Yes, and so again, we're talking about actual values of the team against what it actually does. So again, being that it's really cheap in draft league format, we're putting it at D tier versus F tier simply because of the fact that I would rather have Haunter than the things in F tier. That's fair to say. If I'm wrong to say that, then please forgive me. But that's kind of what we're talking about as far as that goes. I'd rather have Haunter than have anything in F tier.
Yeah.
Let's move on to regular Beedrill. Just get rid of that thing on off the board. Regular
F.
Beedrill. F tier straight up. Again, not below 100 speed.
I don't think we need an in-depth conversation on regular Beedrill.
Beedrill too much already. Just put it in F already so we can get to the good version.
Exactly. We're gonna finish off three more Pokemon that are kind of one more Pokemon that's kind of on the lower side, but definitely better than F tier for sure. Garbodor.
I mean, Garbodor is something that you can draft.
But why would you?
When you get sniped. That's basically
Right.
It's your backup poison.
It's your backup Lowland Muck. It's like you lost a Lowland Muck, you lost Drapion, and you kind of pissed off.
No, it's more of
You don't
backup
draft
Vileplume.
You draft it because your other spike setter got drafted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Basically, if you have a Megalopony,
I'm like, I want to load to your spike setter.
yeah, basically, Megalopony plus Spikes is really common core. If you have Megalopony and you haven't gotten a Spiker yet, and you have like one Pokemon left in the draft, you're like, oh, I can only afford Garbodor. Guess I'll make it work.
Right.
It's that kind of Pokemon.
I've been on a Garbodor kick lately, and I've not been impressed with that. I thought it would deal with a little bit more than it does. The problem is it just spikes and explodes, which I kind of knew it was going to do. But I was kind of hoping to at least make something out of its other cool gimmicks, and I haven't been able to find a way to do it yet.
It just doesn't do it doesn't do enough very well. I would.
The problem is same tier usually has things like Quillfish or other mons that kind of do what it does. They just have other cool utility too.
D tier for Garbodor.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
I'll do tier though. At least can do some things that are kind of cool.
Yeah, better than the F tier mons for sure.
Yeah, because it does things.
Let's move into Skuntank, a one weakness Pokemon that really doesn't have the best abilities out there. It does, of course, have the Aftermath ability, which can be useful in certain situations. Has decent HP stat at 103, a mid-range speed tier, but just not very much on the high power side. Has access to moves like Explosion. Has a very deep special attack pool, but its special attack isn't very helpful. It doesn't have access to Nasty Plot, which would be able to make its special attack actually useful. What do you guys have to say about Skuntank?
So I think you can sum up Skuntank in like a very simple way, and it's basically Drapion, but without all of the qualities that makes Drapion good.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
The one thing Skuntank had going for it for a while was Defog, and then Ultrasound Ultramoon happened, and now everyone and their mother has Defog.
Yeah.
So Skuntank lost all value.
Yeah.
It was niche as a low tier defogger, and now it's not.
It's like, okay, cool, this thing can still defog, but now there are, instead of like 50 mons that can defog, and like only 20 mons that can rapid spin, there's now a billion things that can defog and a billion things that can rapid spin.
Here can remove those rocks. Yeah.
Exactly. So what would you guys put it at? Still D tier or F tier?
I'd put it high D tier.
High D tier. Above Arbok?
Yeah, it's more viable than the other Pokemon in D tier.
Still has the niche of Pursuit Trap. I mean, it can do that.
Yeah.
Definitely can do that. It's better than pretty much all the other Ds already by default.
Right.
Yes.
It doesn't get knockoff, so it's not. That does make me not wanting to put it above into a C tier. If it had knockoff, it'd be a C tier Pokemon. It has good coverage moves. Just doesn't have quite the power. It does have priority access with Sucker Punch. But you're right. Everything that's good about Drapion is it's
Missing.
Yeah, it's missing.
If Drapion was bad, it would be Skuntank.
Correct. Let's move on to the next one that would be interesting on here, which would be Toxicroak.
Toxicroak.
The only fighting poison Pokemon we're going over, by the way.
I mean, it's a versatile offensive mon, being that it can be physical or special. You can also run a substitute set pretty effectively.
Mm-hmm.
It's not super great, but it's definitely okay. I think there's certain matchups where it can do things.
It's a Pokemon that I actually like a little bit because not like as a great, like, oh my gosh, this is awesome, because it can be a bit of a scouter with anticipation. Anticipation can help a little bit scout your opponent. Not like heavy scouting, but a little bit give you an idea of what's going on. You don't know the exact move that it gets, but it does help you just have a general idea of, okay, this is a thing that my opponent could do. That's a thing my opponent could have, you know? But again, you're right. It doesn't do very many things very well. It could be a Scarfer. It does have Bullet Punch access. It does have Drain Punch. Has Fake Out. It's just... What would you have to say about it, Thunderbug?
It's basically when it comes to a game, it's gonna do one of two things. It's gonna click SD or it's clicking Nasty Plot. If it does anything else, that person doesn't know really what they're doing with it because it doesn't do anything else. The SD Dry Skin is it's a fun niche gimmick. At the same time, it's still kind of frail. It can fall over real quick, and sometimes it just doesn't have the power you really need it to have to do sweep teams.
And I
agree with
the chat with the chat saying that Toxicroak is likely to be a D tier. I said that's by Kilo Patton. Toxicroak likely to be a D tier. It's versatile, but the problem with it is the common issue of revolving around psychic types being very common. And yes, it is an X4 weakness to psychic. Not a fun thing to deal with, at least in my opinion.
I think D tier is a bit harsh on it. I think C is
a
much better fit.
It at least can be a threat. So I think it's better than the D tiers because it's actually can be a threat to some teams.
Absolutely.
Yeah, this thing is basically a poor man's Lucario. It can be SD Nasty Plot, has priority, and decently strong stab. Basically, a poor man's Lucario.
You have a water type that tends to only really spam Scald and not do much else. And it's either Scald or Toxic, and all of a sudden they have a Toxicroak. You gotta now decide, okay, Toxicroak comes in on me every time and just can abuse me for SD or punch holes in my team.
Yeah, it's a good bulky water abuser, and that's why I would put it above
really
D.
Gimmick, and it's actually a really strong gimmick. It just isn't very effective. It's not as good as it could be, but its gimmick is really good.
Would you put it in D or C tier?
C tier.
C tier?
That gimmick we just went over. That the ability to abuse bulky waters alone makes it C tier.
Okay. Would you put it in front of Venomoth?
Yes.
Put it in front of Golbat?
I'd put it just behind Tentacruel.
And maybe even in front of the front of C tier almost.
Front of C tier almost. I'm still putting it behind Tentacruel though, because Tentacruel, again, being a spinner, being a water type, very, very useful mon. Fair to say?
Yeah.
All right. Let's move on to Salazzle.
So I recently used Salazzle in the Hive Mega Beedrill, which is probably a top 2 most competitive leagues in the format right now. And I finished the season, was it 9-1? And I made it to semifinals in the playoffs. And I had Salazzle on that draft, and it actually performed pretty well. I mostly used an offensive Nasty Plot set, but I also brought out the Sub-Toxic set a few times, and it definitely pulled its weight. I don't think it's a bad Pokemon. I don't think it's particularly great either. But yeah, it's pretty average in my opinion. I'd put it in C tier along with the other Pokemon like Toxicroak. and Tentacruel.
Again,
a higher
X for
speed here.
weakness to ground. It basically does what Nihilego does, but with just not quite as much natural power or Beast Boost ability. So I understand what you're talking about there. The corrosion ability is very, very awesome, though, because it does allow you to be able to still hit steel types with poison moves.
Yeah.
So
Only with Toxic.
only with toxic. You're correct. But that's kind of one of those.
Anyways, because they're just going to fall with a fire blast.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of where I'm just kind of stuck with it. Nasty Plot Focus Sash set can be a very good face breaker very early on.
Focus Sash is not the bring. It's mostly Nasty Plot Z move that you have to
Bring
worry
your
about.
Z, or if you didn't put a Z on it, you bring Life Orb and you feel sad.
No. What I was talking about right there was basically as a lead-off batter. If I wanted to use it as a lead-off batter, which I have.
I don't think it's a very effective
I
lead.
think more as a mid-game breaker or a late-game cleaner.
Right.
Honestly,
Yeah.
When I say that kind of stuff, please don't take it as gospel. I'm just talking about what I personally have enjoyed using it as. If that makes sense. Does that make sense?
It's got the one trick really it can do. I mean, Subtoxic is cute and all, but really it's mostly there for Nasty Plot, and it's really good at that one trick though, which is what makes it really scary and pretty good. Which is why I think King said it. Top of tier C is probably where it goes.
Top of tier C. I can agree with that. I don't think it's better. Would you put Quillfish though above it?
Yes, I would.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure that we understood each other on that, because that's one of those I just wanted to ask your opinion on again before we move on.
Yeah, it's a fair question.
We have 4 poison types left, by the way. All of these are very interesting Pokemon. All of these are very awesome. I'm excited for these last 4, by the way. We have Mega Beedrill, Nidoking, Nidoqueen, and Toxapex. Here we go, guys. Which one do we start off first?
I mean, let's go with Mega Beedrill first.
Yes, because Mega Beedrill is probably. Let's go with Mega Beedrill and then Toxapex, as those are the more one-dimensional or less flexible ones out of the 4. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, definitely.
Mega Beedrill, as we all know, face breaker at 150 attack and great speed at 145. Generation 7 did an amazing job of making this thing more good out of the gate for not having to deal with the waiting one turn for speed boosting. Adaptability is an amazing ability, makes the stab moves that much stronger. Has access to Drill Run, has access to Fell Stinger, has access to X Scissor and U-Turn. What were you gonna say there?
You can use it as a Pursuit Trapper as well.
Pursuit Trapper
Mega
as well.
Latios, for example.
And of course a Fairy Buster with Poison Jab. Where would you guys rank this thing at? Now, granted, it is usually a much cheaper pickup than Mega. It is a much cheaper pickup than Mega Venusaur, but again, weak to rocks. Can't really take a special attack. Well, sorry, can't take attacks as well as other Pokemon out there in the format. What
That's
would
an
you guys say? What was that?
That is an understatement. That doesn't take attacks as well.
I know. I'm being nice to it. What can I say? What do you guys have to say about Mega Beedrill that I haven't said?
So, I feel like you're a big fan of Mega Beedrill, am I right?
I have used it in a couple of UU teams in the past. Really enjoyed it. I have not used it in league format, so I don't know very much what it would do like for me in the force of a league season. So
It's
please,
very similar stuff to you see in standard tiers.
Okay, so one of those that can either be that is an absolute buster, but at the same time can be defeated.
Yeah, if you run into Skarmory or Celesteela, basically,
Right.
It's better just not to bring it most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And its main weakness is rocks.
Yeah.
That's the main thing it has to watch out for. Now I'm going to ask you a question. It might shock you. Are you familiar with the Iron Bee as a moveset?
It's the Iron. Is it Iron Head or Iron Tail?
The Iron Bee. Basically, it's Iron Defense Roost, Max Spadef.
Iron Defense Roost Max Bedef.
Yes.
I would not think of that as being a set.
Certainly. And I think the last moves are SD and a stab of your choice, usually X Scissor, because Poison Jab will get walled by steals
Yes.
more effectively. I mean, it'll still get walled, but the Iron Bee I have seen used on multiple occasions in some lower tier leagues to some great success. It's a great meme. Just wanted to throw that out there. Not as a serious talking point, but just as a meme.
Thunder, what do you have to say about this mon?
There's not much really to say. It's Mega Beedrill. It, like he said earlier, it basically what it does in ladder is what it does in league. It clicks U-turn, poison jab, and does a couple other things, and it's kind of got its role it does, and it basically depends on was your draft good? Yes. Well, then you can probably deal with Mega Beedrill pretty well. Was your draft terrible? Well, you're going to have a terrible time.
Right. And it's one of those that you do have to make sure that you're aware of in that week matchup. You have to basically make sure that whenever you're dealing with a Mega Beedrill, you have to protect, the mon that you basically have built to destroy it. You have to. Mega Beedrill
The main thing I do when I'm facing a Mega Beedrill is I prioritize rocks in my build.
Yes.
Yeah.
If you fail to do so, you're going to get busted by it. Absolutely.
Yeah, because between rocks and if you put a rocky helmet on something that can resist a U-turn, very quickly, and becomes not a threat anymore.
Yeah, definitely.
Where would you put this mon at as far as in a draft league format? Would you put it in a B tier or an A tier?
I think it's high B or low A. It's one of the two.
Yeah, because it's a threat you absolutely have to be 100% actually prepared for. Like you need at least one, maybe even two rockers to make sure they stay up, and bring your priority. And if you don't really have a good way to do all those things, you're going to have a really bad time with Beedrill. Because it can outspeed pretty much anything that's not scarfed, and will just destroy it with its stab moves.
And I think it can outspeed base 80 Scarfers as well, so Scarf Mammothswine is not an answer to Mega Beedrill.
I can put some random thing on a Scarf and just have a fun time. Like in the tryouts we're doing for the DPL right now, someone was playing a Beedrill. I basically had to run Helmet Jellicent in order to try to beat it.
Yikes, that's not a good look.
Knockoff did 60% to it still. And I had to run Helmet Jellicent and Banded Quick Attack Zero Aura. And that was how I beat it.
Oh, gosh.
So the thing with Beedrill that can make it even more threatening is if you're playing a good player and they predict you to switch out into, say, your Steel type, and they hit that SD, now you still have to stay in and take the attack, whether it be U-turn or drill run, but it's a +2 hit rather than a neutral hit, and that's going to chip it down a lot faster.
Yes.
So if the Beedrill user can get a few turns right, he can really open up some holes.
Absolutely.
The mon is capable of building around it for the opponent and the player using it, and you have to be really precise on how you build a team around Beedrill. Because if you build a crappy team build around it, you can't expose things they can do well and what it forces people to bring.
I mean, a pretty simple core would be Beedrill plus, say, a Specs Typhlosion, because Beedrill's main counters are going to be Steel types. Typhlosion has no problem with Steel types, so that would be a really cheap mon to pair with Mega Beedrill, for example, although, again, Stealth Rocks are a big issue in that core, so you'd want a quality Defogger.
Ideally, you'd pair it with something more like a Heatran, in my opinion. Now, that's just me, though.
That would be fair. Any fire type, basically.
And the reason why I say Heatran is because Heatran's not weak to rocks, and so it's going to be able to basically, and it's a rock setter itself, so it's one of those that it's and it has flash fire. So I mean, again, it does what Typhlosion does, but costs a lot more. Beedrill for bottom of A or top of B, which was fair?
I think either is really fine. I don't have a preference between the two.
Just to make sure I don't trigger somebody who's a UU beast and just wants to run Mega Beedrill at all times. We're gonna put it in the bottom of A just to make sure it's fair.
Right at that, UU is mostly dominated by arrows. That's the even in UU, we get smashed by arrow.
Yeah. What would you guys? Let's move on to the next of the least versatile of the four we had left.
Least versatile is Toxapex.
Well, no. I was saying of the remaining three we have left, we have Nidoking, Nidoqueen, and Toxapex. Is that fair to say?
The least versatile of those remaining three is definitely Toxapex.
Say what?
You're saying what's the least versatile of those three? It's Toxapex.
Yes, and I'm not saying I'm not saying that's a bad thing. Toxapex is an amazing fucking Pokemon. Amazing, right?
Yeah.
But all three of its abilities are very good abilities.
Only Regenerator is really good.
Yeah. Merciless is bad.
I've used it before. And
Merciless isn't bad. It's bad on Toxapex.
Correct. Obviously,
Merciless. Broken thing in the world.
99 times out of 100, you're running Regenerator, unless you just have the most niche of weeks that you have to build it for.
No, the reason why you're not running Regenerator on Toxpex is if you accidentally keep it on Merciless as default. When you're building.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough.
So Toxpex is by far the best poison type, in my opinion. It's not close. It's better than Megavenu. It's an instant S tier, in my opinion.
I think that's fair in my opinion as well. I mean, amazing defensive stats, great speed tier for being able to box out, someone from trying to do a Trick Room team on you. Regenerator ability, one of the best abilities to have on your roster in Draft League format. Great coverage moves. Because its attack and spatak are both very, very low. You don't really care whether you're running one or the other. You might run physical one week just to have knockoff and liquidation available to you. You might run just scald one week just because that's as your move. You basically have the opportunity to run toxic spikes. You have baneful bunker, which is an amazing protect improvement. You have haze to basically deal with any setup Pokemon. It is a very versatile Pokemon. When I say it as the least versatile was between the Niddos, it's because the Niddos and the Niddos. And is that fair to say?
I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
But it does what it does so gosh darn well, And it's one of those that you can pick it as your water type and not be pissed off that you picked it as your water type.
Now, Toxpex, I'd say, is also the best water type in the format, along with the best poison type.
That's also fair to say because most of the water types that cost more than it, in my opinion, are just not as useful as a water type wall. Which, let's be honest, about most of us that draft water, when we're drafting water types, the majority of the time are going for, at least for our main water type, a walling water type. Fair to say?
Let me pull up a draft board so I can see all the water types that are more expensive than it. See, we have things like Manaphy, which, I mean, it's a powerful breaker with Tail Glow, but it's not a defensive beast like Toxpex. You have Tapu Fini, which doesn't have reliable recovery, although it is a nice typing. You could argue that it's a better typing than Toxpex, but at the same time, no reliable recovery does hurt it quite a bit.
Correct.
And then after that, you have Toxpex, which is the best bulky water in the game. Maybe not in the game, because there's Ubers, but in the format for sure.
Absolutely. And that's kind of the thing about it, is that Toxapex does what it does so well. So well.
I use Toxapex a lot, and most of the time you're going to see two sets. One of them is Scald, Toxic, Recover, Haze.
Yes.
The other one is Scald, Toxic Spikes, Recover, Haze. So really just one move slot switching between Toxic and T-Spikes depending on if they have a grounded poison or if they don't. That's basically all you need to do with Toxapex, max HP, and then usually mixed defense is fine, although if you're facing something like... what's a good example? Like if you're facing Zapdos, you can run Toxic Spadef, and you actually beat Zapdos, unless it's offensive T-Bolt, which will 2-hit KO you, but you can take it and regen it off pretty easily.
And also in the context of the league, in the context of the league, you do also have Pain Split available for you, in the context of league surprise moves to be able to pop on somebody. So, and it has, of course, it has opportunity to use. Light Screen if you wanted to use that 1 week. I mean, again,
I've used Light Screen Pex. It's not bad.
Yeah.
If your team's really weak to a special attacker, you can throw up the Light Screen for 5 turns. I wouldn't recommend using Light Clay on it, but just throw up the Light Screen and you can switch around a lot easier versus that one massive threat to your team. I think I used it versus was it Tapu Koko? Like my team got destroyed by Koko, so I threw up a Light Screen, and then everything beats Koko.
Right.
Yeah.
You okay out there? You getting arrested?
Oh no, someone is, I think.
No,
sorry about that.
But no, I agree with you guys wholeheartedly. Toxapex better than Mega Venusaur, because Mega Venusaur costs you your Mega Slot, right? That's one reason why Mega Venusaur is not as good, but also Toxapex Regenerator means that you can take the hit and don't have to use a move like Synthesis to get yourself up. It has recovery on its own without Regenerator, but it just makes it to where it can basically sit there and you can basically burn down someone's PP and win out in a long game format. You can also just basically, it's a mon that you're forced to prep for. You're forced to prep for it.
That's
so good.
Definitely true. And one of the insane things about Toxapex. Right, you go first.
As you mentioned earlier, Recover's got more PP, and basically, as you said, based on the investment you put in, you can basically just scout what is their answer to Toxapex in this mon, and they reveal, this mon can 2-hit KO Toxapex, because you're not going to one-shot it. So now that you can 2-shot it, I can switch out, get all my health back with Regenerator, and use something else to wall you instead, and come back in later, or something else.
Right, like the only thing.
So
one of the only things I think that can one-shot it, and that's only in certain situations and investments, is going to be like Specs Lele, running Psychic on you. But even then, most leagues ban Lele, so it's, what I'm saying. It's just one of those that from the stretch, there's very little that one-shots it.
Yeah, I have a pretty good example of that. There's a Toxapex spread, which I believe is max HP and 180 defense, but you don't need the nature. You can throw that into Spadef,
okay,
and that will take a Adamant Landorus EQ.
Nice.
Or a Jolly Landorus EQ after rocks. So that's Lando T. It's a very strong Pokemon, and if you really want T-Spikes up versus their team, you can just lead off with your Toxapex. If they lead off with Lando, doesn't matter, you just go for T-Spikes anyways, you take the hit and you regen it back. And then when you switch back in, you're at about 40% after leftovers and regen, and then you switch out again, boom, you're at 75.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So this Pokemon, you can whittle it and it won't matter because it'll just regen it all back with ease.
Mm-hmm. And it's one of those that there are some Pokemon that are basically toxic sitters, toxic stallers that don't really have the ability to sit there as well as we'd like them to, but Toxapex does. If you pair Toxapex with at least one more Regenerator Pokemon, I wouldn't recommend going for 2 more, just 1 more Regenerator Pokemon on your roster. You have a deadly combination of just being able to just sit there and work around hits and whittle things down.
Yeah, for sure. And one easy way to kind of mitigate your team's weakness to hazards is to run Toxapex plus Clefable, because you have Magic Guard and you have Regen, which means no matter what, you're winning the hazard game in terms of your defensive mons.
Absolutely.
Another thing about Toxapex, one criticism you might have for it is that it's very passive, but with Haze, it really doesn't matter, because if they set up, you just Haze, and it's actually a pretty small list of mons that can actually 2-hit KO Toxapex even after a boost.
Yeah.
So,
and even then, it's still you have to be able to 2-hit KO after the boost, and then after it hazes away your boost, you have to still be able to 2-hit KO it again after that.
That's so annoying.
Which some mons can't even do that either.
Yeah, you have to do...
Unless they have a mon as Taunt, or can 2-hit KO it after the boost, and the boost is gone.
Yeah, Taunt is the main stop to Toxapex, but
that's
at the same time, you're risking Scald Burns that whole time.
Exactly.
Right.
That's why that mon is not passive. It looks passive, but it's really not.
It's very aggressive in its passivity.
That's a decent way of putting it.
Yes.
You always have a threat of toxic T-Spikes or Scald Burns.
Right.
You can't switch in physical attackers on it freely.
This is one of those Pokemon that almost forces you, I love playing Cresselia, right? This is one of those Pokemon that makes you do the stupid set, not the stupid set, but the very annoying set of trying to run Flame Orb on Cresselia, just to be able to help not have to deal with the fact that he's trying to while you were sitting on them, he's trying to toxic you and basically deal with you. Fair to say?
I mean, I think Flame Orb Cresselia is a bad set, no matter what.
I didn't say it was a great set. I'm just saying it's one of those that makes you just go, damn it, let's try it,
I think Toxapex still just walls the Cresselia. I don't think the Cresselia is doing anything Toxapex in return.
Of Toxapex versus Cresselia.
I don't think it even does 30% with Psychic.
Yeah, it probably does only 30% with Psychic and
20%. And that's being generous.
20% with Psy Shock.
Psychic does around 30%. Psyshock, if you're Spadef, does up to 37.5%.
Okay.
Big damage.
Yeah.
That's a whole regenerator right there.
Yeah, I know, right? Which is why it would be a setup Cresselia, a Calm Mind Cresselia, just to be able to even halfway deal with it.
All right, I'm gonna click Psychic and kill this Cresselia with my Flamor Crest. Oh, they went hard Tyranitar.
Yes.
Well, I got Pursuit trapped and lost.
Exactly. We're talking about hypotheticals here, and obviously that's not a great hypothetical.
Yeah. Yeah, Pex plus Pursuit is actually really disgusting.
Pex in general is disgusting.
Yeah.
I love you, Toxic Pex, you evil bastard. Let's move on to the Nidoking itself.
So Nidoking and Nidoqueen are pretty similar.
Depending on who you actually talk to, one is better than the other. You got some folks who are more interested in the sheer and are more interested in King. Some folks that are more interested in Queen, just because of just a little bit different of a spread as far as their power goes. You know, on Queen you have basically a little bit lesser attack power, and a little bit less special attack power, but a bit more natural defensives, as well as a bit more thicker on the HP. Whereas with King, you get a bit more regular power, as far as being at over 100 attack power, and also being a bit faster at 85. What do you guys think about both these two mons?
Fun fact, Nidoqueen is actually usually more powerful than Nidoking, because you can afford to run Modest, whereas Nidoking really appreciates the speed more.
Correct.
So like,
and that is why Queen is better than King.
You're going to encounter a lot of base 80s in draft format. It's a super common speed tier. Nidoking is going to run Timid for those Pokemon. Nidoqueen, well, obviously you're not going to outspeed them, which is obviously preferable. You are going to be able to run Modest a lot more. So Nidoqueen is actually, on average, stronger. However, it's slower.
Right.
But it's a little bit more bulky.
Yeah. So
And it makes
really
up for that lack
toss-up.
of speed on those base 80s because of its bulk. They can take that hit and destroy it.
And Nidoqueen, you do usually see drafted slightly more earlier than King. In fact,
Definitely.
you actually can see Nidoqueen very often in times drafted in second and third round in some leagues. We're talking about bigger leagues, not like the 16-team leagues, but
Yeah, definitely. It's a very solid pick. It can basically fill a lot of roles at the same time.
Yeah.
You got your bulky ground, you got your rocker, you got your grounded poison, you have your special breaker, etc. It's also a viable surfer.
Yeah. It does. Both of these mons do so much for the roster. And again, it depends on what you're trying to draft it for, whether you think that Queen is better or King is better. But in general, Queen is better just because of the fact that Queen will fit into more rosters more naturally than King. At least in
Queen will fit onto a bulkier roster. King will fit better onto a more Volt-turny offensive type of roster.
Yes, I believe that 100%. Both of these mons, though, are the definition of versatility in as far as what they can actually go about doing. They're not locked into X or Y. They do so many things very well. They're just very good Pokemon.
It's very common to look at a matchup and be like, oh no, I have no switch into Nido.
Right. With the Nidos, do we put them in the S tier alongside Mega Venusaur and Toxapex, or we put them in the A tier?
I think I would make an S- tier for these guys if I could. I think low S is their home, in my opinion, just for the value. Like, they're not expensive mons to get in a draft.
Correct. Nidoqueen
But
is usually
they're so
a little bit more
good.
expensive than King, from what I see sometimes. If they're running tiers, they're usually the exact same tier. But if they're running points, usually Queen's a little bit higher than King.
I mean, it's 1 point usually.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, they're not
1
very
point
far.
is the
Like,
difference
let's
between,
see,
like-
in DPL, they're the exact same price.
Yeah, I have seen them both in that kind of, and again, they both do their job very well. They both fill so many roles. They're both very versatile, and they're, just able to break things. Because again, while their attack stats are not godlike, they both get sheer force, which means so many of these moves that they're using become that much harder hitting, that much more destructive.
Yeah.
Then bonus points for the life orb sets.
Yes, I mean they are basic.
Also, they're literally 2 of the best electric checks in the game.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. They force you to have. They are amazing for what they do. They really are. They are the mons that force certain fairies to quiver and cower in fear, because they just go, I don't know what to do with it, you know? Granted, they are both weak to water, which means that they don't switch into as many things out there, because water attacks are very common. But at the same time, they just do a great job. They offer you great versatility. They are mons that both of them can be effectively brought to almost every single match in a league very easily. Maybe Queen a bit more matched than King, but both of them very, very good. I have no fear putting them in S tier, because they are cheaper than Toxapex usually, and they are not a mega like Mega Venusaur. I don't think that they're as good as Toxapex and Mega Venusaur, but they are amazing Pokemon. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, side note for the record, the water types hurt them. The water types are also scared as hell of them, because the random sheer force Thunderbolt's not very pleasant to take for most waters.
Right, absolutely.
Well, actually, usually water types, bulky water types are usually the switch into these two, like a example.
Usually. Like Melodic can kind of take it okay.
Yeah, stuff like Suicune, stuff like Melodic, stuff like Vaporeon, they don't mind switching into it.
By the way, one time I had a Spadef Toxapex versus a Nidoqueen. Guess how much the Earth Power did?
How much did your power do?
27.
That's not bad.
It was a defensive Nidoqueen.
I
Oh,
was gonna say, it had to be like defensible, like poison point?
God.
I don't remember it.
Well, I think we have we have our list pretty much in order. We didn't really disagree on too very many things. The one thing I do want to revisit, just to make sure our viewers are okay with, we're going to run through the list one more time and then kind of go from there and finish up. Poison types, still a very, very smaller type pool, as far in comparison to some types as far as an overall draft thing, which is what I'm very excited to see what happens in like the WBE this summer. It's 28 teams, and I don't know for sure, but I think that they're drafting from the exact same pool, as in all teams are drafting from the exact same Mon pool, so I'm very curious to see how that works out. We have essentially in here, starting in the S tier, we have Toxapex, and we do actually have these in order of viability. From left to right is top of the tier, lower the tier. S tier, we have Toxapex, Mega Venusaur, Nidoqueen, Nidoking. A tier, Roserade, Amoonguss, Lowland Muck, Gengar, Scolipede, and Mega Beedrill. B tier, Drapion, Dragalge, Crobat, Nihilego, and Quillfish. C tier, Salazzle, Tentacruel, Toxicroak, Weezing, Golbat, Venomoth, Venusaur, Victreebel, Vileplume. D tier, Kanto Muck. We have Guntank, Arbok, Garbodor, and Haunter. F tier, Swalot, Ariados, Beedrill Regular, Dustox, and Survivor. Okay, we have somebody in the chat saying Roselia for C tier. What do you guys think about that?
No.
I've never seen Roselia drafted. I know it can be an Eviolite user, but again, I've never seen it drafted, so I can't make any assumption on it based on that. I've
seen it drafted multiple times.
You have?
Yeah. Gypsy King used it in DPL Season 1 for many games.
So what would you say about Roselia, and where would you put Roselia at?
For 1 point Mons, it's one of the best ones.
Would you rather have Roselia on your team or Haunter on your team?
Roselia for sure.
Would you rather have Roselia on your team or Kanto Muck?
I think, like I said, I'm going to say Roselia is probably a D tier.
It's the top D.
It's being D because of the 1 point value.
Because it is a 1 point value, and that 1 point value is a huge thing, and it's also minimal value in tier draft. So I think you're right. Yes, thank you for that. Yes, I appreciate that because it's one of those we wouldn't have thought about. It's one of those that, again, there are certain Mons that if you just don't draft them or don't see them in very many drafts, which you wouldn't see them in very many drafts, Roselia, unless it's like a very, very large team pool draft or anything of that nature. Thank you for that recommendation on that. I appreciate you. Yes, that was a very good thought. Are there any other Mons in that not fully evolved thought process that we think we left out?
I mean, I've seen Mariani drafted.
I was getting ready to bring that up. Marini.
Baby Pex.
Pretty much the only other one that could even be reasonable to discuss is possibly putting Marini up there.
Because Marini still gets Regenerator.
It's not a real Pokemon though, so I don't
It's
feel
not.
the need to put it on the list.
Yeah, you're correct. It's looking at its defenses. Its defenses are way too low. If it at least had 70 in defense, we could talk about it, but it does not. So Marini would not be one that you'd even talk about at this point. I think we have pretty much a very definitive list going forward. I think that our list is about as perfect as it can get for a poison type draft viability. Obviously, there are a couple of things inside the tiers. You may have an argument as to why something inside of a tier is better inside that tier than other things are. But I think as an overall definitive standpoint, as far as draft league viability, I think we have a very fair list up here. S tier, we do have, of course, the mid-price Pokemon of Nidoking and Nidoqueen, alongside the more expensive Toxapex and Venusaur. Great Pokemon overall. Definitely, if anyone's going to, if you are targeting a poison type, you're targeting those mons. A lot of good A tier Pokemon, just because the poison type is very well spread. It isn't like the fire types where there's a very huge difference between the A and S tier fire types and the more mediocre fire types. You know, very interested to see how other types finish out. But I think we did a very fair list on this. Any final remarks, King?
Toxapex is the best Pokemon in the game, etc.
So you actually want me to put a whole new different tier for Toxapex almost?
No, I don't know if it's the best mon in the game. No. It's not, definitely.
It's very good though. It's very good though.
It's the best water. It's the best poison. There you go.
Boom. Thunderbug, any final remarks?
No, I'm good.
For those of you guys that have been in this video this whole entire time, please feel free to leave a subscription on this channel. We are going to be doing more of these going forward, as well as leave a like and anything in the comments below that we may or may not have screwed up on. In the description there is going to be a link to the actual page if you want to do your own tier list and show us where we screwed up at. We appreciate you so very much for sticking with us and going through this. This is a very long discussion video that we love to do, because it's very fun to talk about actually ranking what the actual validity and viability is. And obviously, things that are worth more in points don't necessarily mean that they're worth more in overall draft viability, correct? As we've seen and hear both ourselves. And thank you guys very much. King, Thunderbug, let's say thank you and let's get out of here.
Thank you.
Okay. Supposed to say thank you, King.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. I love you guys. This was very much fun to do. Have a wonderful night. We'll talk.